episode 2. That's usually where, they've established the characters again. They haven't addressed whatever happened in the cliffhanger, like whatever did happen to the Loco Doco character. Is he dead? Is he still around? No one knows. And unfortunately, he doesn't appear on shows anymore, so nobody can find out what he's up to now. That's actually too cruel. We'll have him actually on as a guest soon. Of course. We'll make it all good. We'll fucking hug it out or whatever, We're not going to be like when Isaiah Thomas and Magic Johnson met. They all started crying and having an interview with each other. But, we'll just make it seem civil, for the cameras.
Twitch chat says that Face Check's trying to run at the same time as us. That seems like a bad mistake by them.
Well, it's their funeral. I don't choose who's charismatic in the world and whose show's interesting. So, listen, I enjoy listening to Dominate as well. That's why I have my show with Dominate tomorrow at 7 p.m. CET and 10 a.m. PST, where he'll be giving a lot of the same opinions to someone more intelligent. And no, actually, if you want to watch that show, there's VODs for both of these. Watch whichever one you want and watch them all later. So, what I would say is, first of all, if you didn't see on Twitter, we do have 2 special guests for this episode. But what we're going to do, unlike back in the day of Someone in Insight, is we're going to have a little preamble first, and then we'll bring the guests on. So the 2 guests are sOAZ, many time LCS champion, mainly with Fnatic, obviously, but now playing Immortals. And then we have YamatoCannon, was obviously briefly a pro player and then mainly known as the coach of Splice and then later Vitality, and now has actually moved into the realm of being a content creator. So we'll get to talk about both LCS and LEC. But Monty, see, this is where actually money and time and experience does change you a little bit, because Monty actually removed one of my favorite segments of the show by making it sort of sanitized. Like he has this as sort of, it's almost like the lobby where we set up the show, whereas what I used to enjoy doing, I used to love it when those YouTube comments used to say, when they used to say, it's like 10 minutes and the guest doesn't even talk. They're like 8 of it's like making intro. Yeah, that's right. That's what we do. We can just do that. Like,
all right.
We'll
do that next time. We'll do that next time.
I actually do agree. It is more appropriate. Like it is kind of BS to just make them sit there like,
I did enjoy why you just didn't shut up for 10 minutes and then they just sat in their little box saying nothing. It was great. But
it's amazing how obedient they are, isn't it? Like they could. By the way, if they'd have just jumped in, obviously the show would have started with them, but they would just sit there. The best thing was when I would just be roasting them straight for like 3 minutes, about some team they just lost it or something. But if anything, it kind of just shows what this show was like. Like until we did this show, there weren't many where people really came out with their personality. Like a lot of the other shows that even had that, it was because they were mates with that exact person, and they could do it a little bit. So obviously, we had a super busy weekend, and in fact, spanning into Monday, as we addressed last week, because you have the Monday Night League aspect now. So we had LCS and LEC, the other regions as well, but we'll get to those in a future episode. So how have you been enjoying coming back to the world of actually being paid to watch League of Legends? It's not that bad when you get paid to watch it. I'm going to say
it's true. It's true. It does take the edge off it. So thank you, Cloud9 and AT&T, for providing a reason for me to watch again. I thought it was relatively interesting. It's hard. I'll be honest. It's a little bit hard for me to care because I know the spring split is so meaningless, and just having talked to so many pro players and teams now, that it's pretty much everybody's consensus that like this is a development split, and so they don't really care about their results.
Sure.
Which in some ways is good because it allows teams to take more risks in terms of signing unknown players, trying to develop new rosters. So that's kind of cool. But at the same time, it does have sort of an anticlimax because the first games in Spring Split were always the most meaningless games of the entire season every year, and now they're just double meaningless. So it's been interesting.
Yeah.
But
no, I agree.
It's hard to get hype.
The stakes aren't as crazy. Like they will get towards one that gets close to the playoffs, obviously, and people get going. But yeah, the first week actually didn't really have as much hype as usually the year does, because usually what you're looking at is like, wow, is this going to be where how are they going to get to the Worlds from here if they do badly, whereas, as you say, this is kind of the development split. I mean, you've got teams like 100 Thieves and Papa Smithy out there just messing around. Like that's obviously not their real roster. They just let some guy come over from Australia for a few months until they can figure out who they want to actually play mid lane, obviously. So
it's all right.
Let that one stay. Let that one stay out in the air.
Maybe they can snag Poe Belter off the old Liquid coaching roster if they need to. I mean, clearly, we'll talk about 100 Thieves I think later, but this is another one of those things where with Spring Split being meaningless, I think overreacting is kind of silly to a player that,
of course,
has played 2 games at this level of competition professionally. So it's up to 100 Thieves and Zix and Papa to see how much they can develop this guy. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. I mean, I think like you also mentioned the sort of anticlimax, and for me, a big part of that anticlimax coming into this season was the fact that LCS basically didn't do any hype content whatsoever.
Oh, I wanted to talk about this actually. I thought about making my own video on this topic, except it just so happened scheduling meant I had other stuff. Like basically, if people don't know, in CS:GO, me and Monty are involved with the project that does it's very hands-on. Like we've got loads of stuff behind the scenes we have to do, including just like calls and strategizing and stuff. So I haven't had much time to do sort of more throwaway content. And quite frankly, some of the content I make, it's like sooner or later, I should just start charging like Riot directly. Just pay me like $1,000 a month or something for consulting. Like, why am I just giving you the video for free? Like, why do I get $50 for that instead of $1,000? Because basically in the past, I've used my videos to call out the stuff that I sort of want changed. And in doing so, if you get enough community momentum behind you, I notice it gets changed. So for example, maybe I'm going to say 2 years ago, basically whenever TSM was in their last split, that was like the one that they won. So at the end of 2017, where at that period in time, like at that point in time, I think Bjergsen had been in something mental, like, like 8 finals in a row and was going for like this 5th title. And they hadn't done anything, like literally nothing. And I just said in a video, like, where's the fucking hype? Well, I'm supposed to be a little bit more side. So where's the freaking hype? But basically, my premise was like, you've missed the moment there as well. Like, first of all, not only should the entire poster for that be like Bjergsen's face massive behind with like King's crown on it, and then whoever the challenger is like coming up trying to reach, something like that. And then I even said the whole stage entrance should be like, him in the seat, like you came before me, whatever, the kind of hype I'm talking about. Well, similarly, I agree with you. Think of all the big name teams that are coming into the league in LEC, LCS. You have massive player changes. You have players like Xmithy who've just won a load of championships in a row, changed to a different team completely. You have all these big moves coming over from Europe. You have someone like Broxer has been to the World's Final before. He's won the LEC before. He's coming over. You'd never know it. If you were a casual fan, you would from your knowledge of the scene, but you wouldn't on the broadcast know any of this stuff. So if I were them, I'd use the off season to build that up. Once the moves are known, start getting those videos out, do a little drip feed,
I mean, what's crazy to me is that, I enjoyed Dash's interview with a bunch of the more OG LCS players. But, to me, that's like a piece of mid-season content where you sort of just have something that's cool that people are going to watch. It's not the kind of content you make to hype people up going into the season. And if you just contrast it with everything that LEC did, and then not only that, okay, so you didn't make any hype content. So I'm coming into LCS and I'm expecting maybe you do something different. Maybe you get a little more creative. Maybe you change up the product, which honestly feels very stale at this point in time. Did you do anything in response to a year of the LEC just completely kicking your ass when it comes to broadcast tone, product, and content? No. There wasn't anything new, really. There wasn't anything interesting, particularly about this LCS run. They didn't even really... I was thinking, did they save it for the Monday Night League stuff? Nah, just some new graphics. It just felt like more LCS. There was no hype coming in. And, it was just super disappointing, honestly. Like, I really feel that LCS needs some sort of refresh in terms of its production or its creative endeavors, because LEC is just trashing it right now. Frankly, like LEC is just way more fun to watch. I
mean, I'll also say, I also think LEC should have hyped stuff up. Like they should have had their own separate video about Forgiven. They should have done a video about Nemesis and Selfmade.
At least they had some hype content where it's like Forgiven in the Schalke Stadium or whatever, right?
If I had their resources, I would do a lot more stuff. But yeah, I agree. That's the part that doesn't make any sense. Is their video, the actual hype video, was like I even said this to Quickshot on Twitter. I actually think that got like mildly slept on, because even though people were saying it was cool, mate, if I just put OGN in the corner and didn't say people would be going, "Oh my god, this is the best!" It was phenomenal. That was like good. Something off like a rap video in the 2000s or something. Like that was very high production value, but it was cool at the same time. So yeah, I'm with you. The other angle as well that I actually found really whack as well is, like you say, you come back in, you've heard all these stories, like in the past they've been able to sell sponsorships in the LCS era, now they're trying to get broadcast rights sold. And then when you look at the product, it's the same product from season 3. Like, am I missing something? I know I've always been on this particular axe to grind, that I never understood the concept of LCS, because again, it's like if I was an NFL fan and then you make me watch like 8 games in a row. It's like, I'm only a fan of 2 of those teams. Like, I don't want to watch 8 games in a row. What's even worse, like, who wants to watch 5 best of ones between totally different teams in a row on a day? Like, who is maybe I'm the weirdo and that's the target audience, but like, that doesn't feel like there's anyone exists like that. Like, that feels like a very niche amount of people watch every game in a row of all the teams.
It's even hard for me to do that, right?
Because to me, like, in fact, the NFL is the best example, because since the NFL season compared to any other major sport is easily the shortest, and obviously the playoffs is easily the fewest amount of games compared to any sports league, that's actually the one league you could, in theory, watch all the games. But actually, when I watch it like I imagine people watch league. I watch the teams I'm hyped about, or I watch the marquee matchup. Those are the 2 ways I watch the game. So I feel like logically we should start tailoring the broadcast, whether that means having 2 broadcasts, split your talent up, do one flavor on one with one the other. There's a lot of approaches you could go with, I feel like.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing. Like, it feels like LEC did this entire huge amount of work to get everything rolling over there, to change everything up. And then LCS had an entire year to look at LEC, to look around and do some soul searching and figure out what exactly needed to change. And they changed nothing. And here's a tip that's relevant to potentially you and me, Thorin, right now. If you don't have the best teams, you better make a damn good product so people will watch it.
Yes, I agree. And the sad thing in their particular case is, there's another thing. Nowadays, because now people know that, I won't use the whole gap metaphor, but people understand that there's not really any chance that on average the LCS teams will be as good as LCK. It's now known you don't even have the best actual like teams in the sense. So now you want to have the best product. You want to at least make that angle the best. Like, the idea is, if you put in, again, they've always played favorites anyway, but I would put the max production value possible into the LCS in terms of, I'm not talking about the quality of the image here, people. I'm talking about, again, how do you set up the show? Do you have like a segment that's a pre-game segment that you get people involved in? Do you have something, a post-game show? Like get all these things involved. Get it all involved. Let's level it up. Yeah. I have to say, though, jokes aside, bearing in mind for the intro, for the teaser, rather, enough said. You had a teaser for summoning Insight the Nines, and there wasn't even one for LCS. Like, it's a 2-man operation. I mean, it's not really. We actually have, secretly, we have people behind the scenes. I'll pretend it's a 2-man operation. But I have to say, in that teaser, the joke was, one of the steps up of where we'll be going in the future seasons is that eventually me and you'll be running riot, right? Like, people think that's a joke. Sadly, what I've learned in esports, that I learned a long time ago, is this is the reason why the people who don't make it in esports are always complaining about how they never got a chance. And like, if someone would just give me an opportunity. I don't know what being given an opportunity is. What I'll do is I decide what I want to happen. It's one of the reasons I even just say stuff on Twitter. I say what I want to happen. I go and do it. And then afterwards, the person I wanted to hire me goes, you're pretty good at that thing you're doing. Can I pay you to do it? And I go, finally. So what I've learned is this, Monty. We're going to have to be the only franchised league, because we're doing that in CSGO, if people don't know, that's actually got an amazing entertainment product. And the fact that we're going to do it with bad teams to start off with, we actually might just be doing, like, my joke is, we actually could be doing something, a massive esports league, whatever it is, in 5 years. They'll just have to hire us as the creative team.
Look, man,
or if that doesn't work out, my other dream is, as the NFL goes down and esports go, me and you are just going to do the NFL in 10 years, mate. It'll be us. We'll be the ones running that.
The way that traditional sports are looking to esports now wouldn't surprise me if they actually want the demographic. But I mean, yes, I think that joke really does play. And I the thing that has frustrated me about production, just in general in esports, as the more of these traditional sports people you get in, the more money they want to spend on stupid bullshit. And it's like, I'm like, you don't really have to do it at this level of production, because content is king, not necessarily that you have the fanciest editing or the fanciest camera or like 10 camera operators associated with it. You could make great content at a relatively low budget. And this show is it's the proof of that. Like, we remember when we were kicking Primetime League's ass, and that was like $1 million production, and we were sitting here with $0 in webcams. This show, being the most popular podcast in esports history, is the proof that exists. So I don't know, man. Like, I just prefer to hire good people and let them do their thing, and we'll just let that ride out instead. I think we should take a little break here, though. We need to set up for our guests, of course, guys. So we're gonna have sOAZ and Yamato, because we only have sOAZ for another 40 minutes. So let's get him on and talk about LCS. We're here. We finally did it. Cloud Connections.
Is it for real life?
Yes, presented by AT&T. Everybody's in their box now. We did it. It only took 10 minutes.
What's great now is, obviously, we've got sOAZ, I introduced him before, sOAZ from Immortals, YamatoCannon, formerly of Vitality, now of YamatoCannon's YouTube channel. I don't know. Something like that. Seems fair.
Accurate.
The only problem is, I don't know if Monty did this intentionally, but why have we gone? So we've got both ends of the spectrum. We've got like literally the dictionary definition of like the whiny nerd gamer voice in sOAZ. And then we've got like, they're like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome me to the stage next. Like, obviously, we've got the most ridiculous contrast of all time, haven't we?
I enjoy it. I enjoy it. Also, we have to mention that I think we literally only had Europeans on the show so far, because we just had a bunch of Europeans who are at LCS as well.
You have to realize, Monty, it's only because basically it's like the law. You have to have NA players, like that. There's any NA players in LCS at point in time, and that residency rule has not helped, boys. Like, it's getting rough. It's hard to even find anyone from anything. It's like Paul Belter's like, I can play. I'll play any role in the game. It's like, not you now, Paul Belter. We're trying to find good players. Like,
Paul Belter, you've had 17 opportunities. We know you're a known quantity. We'd rather just take the risk at this point. We'll see how long that lasts. 100 Thieves and Golden Guardians.
Right, here's what I think we should do for this is, right, every week, one of the things I told you from the last episode, the one thing I learned is it isn't that great to just run down all the teams and all the games. It's better to just talk about like the interesting topics surrounding them. So what I thought we would do is this. Right, Yamato's tried to step into our world. You know, this is how arrogant this guy is. He went from like sort of pro player, obviously way too toxic apparently. Sort of player. I tamed that down a little bit. Well, here's the thing. In his team, he wasn't even that toxic. He had like Nuke Dark and like Incarnation, like Shook. So at that point in time, he probably seemed like a Boy Scout compared to them. But then he tried to become a coach. Sort of pulled it off by the end, you know. I mean, listen, he got Attila to a world, so you can probably do anything. That's one of those little shots you're not supposed to respond to. You might have to coach him again one day. And then after that, now he's trying to step into our world, Monty. He's trying to become a content creator. So if you want to step up to the plate, Yamato, here's what I think we should do. You should pick the first team. What LCS team are you interested in? What's a good one to start off with? Who do you like to talk about here?
I think since we have sOAZ here, I think we should start with Immortals.
Obviously.
And also, I'm not stupid enough to host my show at the same time as you guys hosting your show. You know, that's a rookie mistake right there.
Exactly. There you go. You have learned a few of the basics.
See, exactly. See, the key there is that you actually will get viewers. And also, we like promoting people. So we're much more likely to promote your show if we're not in the middle of a show of our own, you know? There's room for all content creators. Right? There you go.
We also relegate people as well. Like, we relegated Loco from this show. He went down from the Premiership to the Championship level. Now we'll see if he can get back up again. Yeah.
He didn't get a parachute payment, though, I'll tell you that.
Exactly. No, of course not.
I do want to talk about.
I think Cloud9 gave him a t-shirt.
I do want to talk about Immortals though, because Yamato, you were saying that it was like the classic sOAZ game, and like that game is exactly what I love about watching you play sOAZ, which is that you've had some of the all-time great teleport plays in League of Legends history, and it just seems like you think very well. I said on Twitter, like when the game devolves into a clown fiesta, you want sOAZ on your team because you can think so creatively about how to use TP. You're so good at baiting people and escaping with it, and you know that was a rough game overall. But the fact that you took that Baron, like Yamato said, was, you know, drawing people down to the bottom side was very impressive, and you're just finding yourself in these situations where you can draw so much pressure. So what tell us about that game and how it was being in a classic NA Fiesta.
Well, I mean, first I knew that even if we're gonna ever win a game this week, it's gonna be really hard, right? Because we didn't have that much practice. So just the process of actually just killing the Nexus was gonna be a tough one, you know, like taking down tier 2s and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I was playing Aatrox and I knew mid-game Rumble cannot side against me. And they already used once Tam ult to bot before that. So, I mean, I just told my team, I'll just play aggro bots, and if Tam ever ults, then just look to do Baron. I mean, yeah, this game was a bit of a fiesta, but at least I'm happy that with the little practice that we had, we didn't like threw it away, by just doing something really stupid or whatever.
I mean, your shot calling was good. Like the fact that you sent Altec down to get the Dragon Soul in the middle of the game.
This was Altec's call actually to do the.
Sure, I'm saying your calls as a team.
Oh yeah.
But you prevented the Baron from being taken while taking the Dragon Soul at the same time. Like there were multiple shot calls in here that I thought were good, and plus you guys played the poke. Like you guys had a pretty bad comp, but you played it well in terms of utilizing your poke and your advantage.
I think for sure in terms of mid game stuff, there's like a lot of good takeaways from the game. At the end of the day, people are gonna see that this game was like a 1 hour game, and I think just by like in the game, for example, I was calling to just play like 2-2-1, right? Because they have 0 engage, right? And we are just struggling playing like 1-3-1 or even 0-4-1. But we just like didn't learn like how to play 2-2-1, or like we didn't learn to play many lane assignments. So this, in my opinion, was one of the main reasons of why the game stalled for so long, because we are just struggling to take down turrets, and I think it can be fixed quite easily depending on how fast we actually learn how to do that.
True. Plus, I mean, we'll have to see if you can do it against the good teams.
Yeah.
It's not a sight to leave them out there.
Honestly,
come on, don't make him wait till MSI, Thorin. Come on.
I will say right now, like, I mean, I watched all the games. I didn't play against all the teams. Like, we only played like three teams in scrims, I think. But as of now, I think there's no good teams in any LCS. Like, there's 0 good teams, honestly.
When was the last time there was a good team in LCS? In your opinion?
In LCS?
Yes.
I think Team Liquid.
Yeah, Team Liquid last
year.
Okay,
I'm just making sure that there was a time when that was true.
I mean, that also, yeah, of course. That also
fits now, there's like a good, decent team. Yeah.
Like that also fits now though, because obviously they didn't have their real lineup anyway, so no one really knows what level they're at.
But it depends if you say like a good. Yeah, I mean, good NLCS team. Team Liquid was good, I guess.
So, what are your thoughts on Immortals starting out? Because the other thing, you came in and you actually managed to pick up the win, right? But you lost your first game against FlyQuest. But FlyQuest has been, the more I talk to other pro players, the more they think FlyQuest is like actually starting the season very strong.
Just look at their lineup. It's not as bad. It's just like an underrated lineup, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a decent lineup. I think it's a bit the same like for ours. If like we will start off a bit better and with more practice, I think people are underestimating those lineups, because they are just used to like TL, TSM, C9 stuff. I think the level of NA is not that good, so any decent team can actually just be in the top 3 easily.
Plus, look at the comp that they even played there. They literally took like their signature champions, like Power of Evil's playing like Victor. Viper literally is like famous for playing River, and like they had exactly what they wanted in that game.
I think you guys had no chance after the draft. I saw Trundle lock in, and then enemy has Senna for free, and trash blind pick against Ignar. This is a mistake.
Like after rewatching, we had like supposed to be like a decent dive level 3 bot, right? Like Riven shouldn't pick up a kill on like the TP, and Lucian shouldn't die. But then we still have full mid prio, and level 4 we had like the biggest slow push. We had like a 3-wave stack bot, but we decided to dive mid instead, and we didn't even get the dive mid. And I have TP advantage after so it will be like a level 5 dive bot, and I think this will maybe not won the game, but it will have like result in enemy bot just being half CS down. So I think there's like quite a few missed opportunities. Like I'm not gonna say like all the draft. There's always gonna be, when you have little to no practice, like it's tough to like say what you want to draft and things like that, because you haven't seen that much of what other people are drafting yet. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of missed opportunities from us, I think, this game.
I mean, I think you guys struggled in both drafts, honestly. Like looking at a lot of the other priority picks we've seen in LCS and in LEC, you guys gave up quite a bit. And yeah, I think when you played against TSM, you played the poke comp well, and you avoided a lot of the damage that could come in from Rumble and LeBlanc. But it does make me a little bit suspicious. And also, like, tell us, like, Viper is known for his Riven, and you're picking the Aatrox, which could prompt a Riven pick. So what was the thought?
I actually talked about, like, so both of this. That's funny you bring it up. So I said, like, we went through a situation yesterday, and I was saying, like, okay, I'm most likely just gonna be playing like Aatrox in this case, I guess. And then I just asked, like, is he gonna play, like, because I know this guy is good on Riven, right? And I asked, like, is he gonna play Riven? And they're like, oh, probably not. He doesn't play Riven much anymore and stuff like this. Okay. So I guess there's like a little bit of confusion. However, like, I think Aatrox is like a good lane matchup against Riven. However,
what do you do with
exactly. So the issue of this game for topside is that we cannot 2v2. Like, Trundle Aatrox is just pretty garbage. So I mean, they had Riven, and what was their jungle?
Lee Sin. Yeah, but you guys didn't take Rek'Sai. Rek'Sai was open as well.
Yeah, I mean, with Rek'Sai, like if I had Rek'Sai jungle and we play topside, like, I think Riven just cannot play the game. Like, I would just, I mean, we would probably be able to dive him at some point, and we had full mid pressure, so it depends on how we play the game. But
well, there's no one for Trundle to ult. There's no one for Trundle to ult on FlyQuest. You know what I mean?
Even the build Cinderhulk into Zeke's Convergence, that was toasty.
I mean, no crazy comment.
I wanted to add about the TSM game before we run away with it. Like, what was so surprising about the TSM game? Like, so as you were saying that you guys haven't figured out to play 2-2-1 or anything else, you played 4-1, which actually makes some sense when you have a poke comp and you're winning on side because you can buy MR. But then TSM, they were just doing the exact same thing. But the issue was, for me, when I was watching this game, was after 10 minutes, Dardoch was just standing there. There was just standing 4 people like this. And even the champion Braum tells the enemy what you're supposed to do, you know? Stand behind Braum. You have to find the threat from behind the Braum. And Dardoch was like constantly showing. And this was so crazy because the simple idea is that you hide and fog. LeBlanc and Lee Sin go from behind. Rumble can also hide and fog. And then they can like commit on you. But then the only thing I see is Bjergsen trying to flank from side, and he's doing it alone the entire game. Because honestly,
and I feel like
was a war.
We had vision. We had like, I mean, we knew where Bjergsen was at every point in the game, like, because I was always like just looking for him, or we had like decent wards on that. Like, not my only, but one of my biggest issues is like I didn't understand why they didn't push out top. Like,
it was weird. After like,
they have a Tam Kench level 11, and he can ult on the entire map, and they never pushed out top, like, just like more than river side, you know, like.
You have to realize in the LCS, they're like the British Army in the Revolutionary War with America, right? They have these military tactics where you line up opposite the enemy at the designated time, and then when the guy says go, and they like start doing the trumpets and stuff, you walk towards each other in the mid lane 5v5 until everyone's dead. So then all of a sudden in come these Europeans with these side lanes and stuff,
and guerrilla tactics in the jungle.
They're like the Americans taught by the French. They're coming out of fog of war. They're coming. This is not honorable. That is not the way to win, sir. That's the problem.
You can't just hide in the jungle and lay traps for people. That's not cool.
That's not what a gentleman does. You have to understand that.
I just want to see if in like in 2 weeks' time it changes, right? Like, I feel like, I mean, as of now, I feel like people are just scared of like making mistakes. But I want to see, like, I mean, mid laners are like just blind picking like Victor when there's Irelia open and things like that. Like it's like fucking nuts, you know. Like in Europe, people never get away with this type of things, but over there in NA, it's like, well, this guy blind picked Victor. Well, you know, maybe I will just play Xerath or something. Like, you know, it's just like what the fuck, you know? Like,
I love it. I love your NA experience that's going on. So speaking of NA, what was your decision to come over to Immortals then? We haven't talked about why you joined the team.
Do you know that thing with like the Benjamin Franklin on the
one of those.
There's a lot of them distributed around in America. He wanted as many of them in a suitcase delivered to him, and then all of a sudden what really happened was once enough of them arrived, he suddenly remembered a boyhood dream he had actually of also playing in the LCS and trying to win an LCS, something like that, right? So.
I mean, players are always gonna go for their best options, right? And I mean, for me, I just go for. I mean, every player is gonna go for the best team / offer, and I mean that's what I did. And I didn't have any, what I assume, good offer in Europe. Sadly, after the Misfits here, I guess none of us really. I mean, deemed that, you know, maybe we were not very good or whatever. I think over in Europe, my take from the off season is just people wanted to, you know, just go all on rookies, just go for like you know, maybe like long term. They didn't care of like for this year, like tanking like 1 or 2 spots, you know, like let's say like maybe they take me and I can get them, you know, like make the team a little bit better. They just prefer to maybe get a rookie, just tank a bit, like, you know, the first split or 2. Maybe the rookie is gonna pay off in the end, and they can pay him a lot less. Like, not that I'm gonna like, if I was gonna get a decent offer in Europe, you know, I wouldn't ask for like tons of money, but yeah, that's my take from Europe this year.
This is what I love about League of Legends. I hope all of you guys out there, all the experts, all the commentators, please just keep doing what you're doing, because it's making my brand so good. Because somehow every year I get to just go, right, it's almost like doing a fantasy draft, right? We're going, right, you take him, I'll take him, and then I get to go, oh, I'm going to take, I'll take sOAZ. They're like guys who won loads of championships. Let me see. I'll take Froggen in the mid lane, and you guys go, they're all trash. They're all washed up, don't you know? And then every year, except once, it's like, oh, worked out again. They're all really good players. And who do you guys have again? Rioma, Demonte, and Bang, right? Well, I think I win this fantasy. Like, what's going on? Like, why do they always write off all the really great players? It's ridiculous. Like, you only had one bad year, and if you didn't notice, everyone else on that team looked terrible, because the entire structure was terrible. The team never had an identity. It collapsed in on itself. Like, every player can't be bad in a 5-man lineup that we're all in theory good.
By the way, you'll be loving this, Thorin. You saw that Froggen won the Player of the Week for the first week as well, as Dignitas just completely crushed people. That was pretty funny.
I was also told that lineup wouldn't work, but you know, what do I know, right?
The one of the game that they played, he was playing Victor against, I don't remember. It was like
Cassiopeia, Crown, COG.
Yeah, Cassiopeia.
Yeah, it was like in this game, like I mean, it should be really risky to play Victor, but I mean, somehow he goes like 6-0. So
thing is, in that game,
he's just too good as mid in NA as well.
It's true. But he also did tell Afro Moo, like Afro Moo's like his bodyguard, basically. It's like, you just get me out of there every time. Like, forget the rest of them. Get me out of there. Leave that Johnson guy to die. He can have his time in a few years. It's Froggen's time now. And then because he should have actually got caught a few times, actually, but they got him out there. They airlifted him out, Mr. President.
I mean, I guess he's just like I think he just played there for quite a bit, so he just knows, you know, how people play, like their tendencies and how they play, and what he can get away with it. So I guess he's like abusing that, and I mean it's working out for him, right?
Sure.
I think also with Dignitas, what I feel with Froggen and Huni is you can talk about synergy all you want, but in the end, the laners, if they know what they need and what they want, they can pull the jungler and actually make decisions for them. And I think we've seen Huni win games on his own through himself. Froggen win games on his own through himself. And I think that's what we saw with the coordination of Froggen and Huni. Like, as we mentioned before, like he was with Victor was diving top at minute 5. That's just not supposed to happen. And I think every other team is kind of in disarray of how they're supposed to impact the early game. And Dignitas, I feel like they had a clear plan.
I think what's going on, honestly, in LCS right now, as we take a look at the start of this season, is that there was a team that had a lot of practice coming in, and that team was Cloud9, and they actually have some of the better teamwork, and every other team is sort of, I think, riding on either their veteran players to do established shot calling, in the case of Immortals, like we saw, or in the case of Dignitas, where they've got this solid fundamental, but many of the other teams just don't have much synergy yet because there wasn't a lot of practice. I mean, so as you were late here, right, because of visa stuff, correct?
Yeah, before first game we had 3 days of practice.
Yeah, exactly.
We had first day we had like 2 blocks, so we played like 3 games against our challenger team after playing 5 games. So we had like 18 games total before.
Did you practice poke comp?
Oh, so I wanted to talk about that before, actually, when you said about our second game. So after our first game, I said, okay, guys, we don't have much practice, so let's just play like an easy comp, just play like 5 CC champs, just like
Engage.
a really easy.
So they didn't you at all, of course.
So you have like a lot of tools. We have engage, and then somehow on stage, we just have a poke comp. We have no engage.
Into the draft.
It's just like what happened there. But I mean, at the end of the day, like I was surprised that we actually managed to pull it off, even if it was there's like mistakes, obviously, but it's normal. And I mean, with zero practice on playing those type of comps, we managed to take the win. And I don't know if did TSM bootcamp? I think they, or I mean, I don't know.
They did, right?
Bootcamp.
I mean,
They
Kobe
did.
was on last week's
So-
episode. He was there a while ago.
So what they did was they went to China, but then they had some issues in December, I think, and then they had to go to Korea after that.
Oh yeah, they went.
but
Korea after,
then they took a break for the holidays, and then they didn't boot camp, I think, in January. So they did their boot camping late last year, and a lot of it, obviously not on the most recent patch or anything like that. And I was talking to some of the C9 players about how they think about boot camping, and C9 apparently last year did the same thing where they boot camped before the holidays and then didn't do much afterwards, and they said they basically just lost all their practice. They felt like they came back really uncoordinated.
My take on boot camping, like the way I've been doing it for the last years, is always, in my opinion, boot camping after Spring Split is always gonna be the most impactful boot camp you can possibly have. But many teams don't do it. But sometimes players will just like do it by themselves, just going to Korea and just play there.
So yeah,
here's the thing, sOAZ, you've just had too much of luxury in your career. That's actually called going to MSI, mate. Like, that's not actually a boot camp. Like, other people don't get to do that. He's like, why don't the other teams just do this boot camp with like the best Korean team, the best Chinese? Like, we're getting a lot from this. It's a lot better than the scrims at home. That's actually a tournament. I don't know if you're aware of that.
No.
He's been in league. He's been in league so long now. He forgot what a tournament was.
I did it 2 years ago. I mean, 2 years ago in Fnatic. With the Buipo Reckless Me lineup, like I did it with Caps. We actually went together, only Caps and me. We went to play solo queue there, and I did it in Misfits as well. I just went solo bootcamp with Hans. Hans came.
Wait a minute, this is even crazier. I thought he meant like the team does a boot camp. He means he just tells one of them like, right, turn up at my house on Tuesday. We're doing a boot camp, and then they turn up like, what's going on here? He's like, you brought the beers and the baguettes and the DVDs, right? Like, let's get the boot camp going. Like, what is this?
It's more like I believe it's like the most impactful boot camp you can do for your season, and it's like sometimes players are gonna be like a little bit burn out of their Spring Split or whatever, right? So I just usually like just ask the teams first, like like the team is gonna be like, okay, like depending of budget or whatever, sometimes teams cannot afford it, and then depending if teams can afford or not, then it just depends on if coaching staff approves or not, right? If they want to make it happen, if they think it's good. So most of the time, it's not going to be all teams or all players is joining, right? So it depends on whoever wants to.
All right.
Fair enough. How do you feel about preseason boot camps, Yamato, from your coaching days? Valuable? When did you have them? When were they most effective?
He probably has a different opinion on doing a boot camp like after the spring split and before the summer split, maybe in a different Asian country, and then the impact it could have on the rest of the season. So yeah, didn't want to make that too obvious, Didn't want to make that too obvious.
No, it's I think I agree that between spring and summer, that's probably the most important time, because like spring has always been useless. Even though the points have changed, it has always been kind of useless. It doesn't matter how good you are in spring. I agree that between spring and summer, that's when you want to ramp up. I think even in the case of G2, what did it matter that they proved to everyone in spring that they are the best in Europe or that they won MSI? The fact that they had to take a break coming into summer and practice less and less, they lost all of their discipline and they peaked at definitely the wrong point in time. And then in the context of boot camping and then taking a break, I think it makes less sense. Usually my biggest fear is when players take too long breaks, especially after they've been at the World Championship, because this is the issue we ran into. We went to Worlds, and then I had Zuzuka. Afterwards, he just went to Korea, he boot camped. So he was playing solo queue because this is what he wanted to do. He told me, Rookie is, like I practice against Rookie, he's better than me. I need to practice because otherwise, if I go to Worlds again, it's not going to make sense. Right? So he went and practiced. Maybe that was a mistake because he was practicing way too much. Then I had two guys, my bot lane. They were not practicing so much in the off season. And then coming into spring, the hope is that you kind of build on something, right? But then I realized my mistake. My guys, when I brought them in 2018, the last tournament they played, which was LVP Finals, was like 15th December. So they took 2 weeks off and then they started practicing with the Vitality. And then instead you have this 2-3 month off and then you come in and everyone is just terrible, Terrible. So I think you need to make sure maybe the synergy is not the most important thing, but making sure you're in shape and you start to ramp up. The way I would bootcamp is not necessarily to like scrim. Maybe you spend time together, you play, maybe you do some activities, get to know each other, get a feel for each other. So you make sure that everyone's on the same page. You can begin to digest when you're taking a break for the holidays, and then you come in with a concept, with an idea of how you want to approach things. But practicing hard and imagining like figuring out this is how we macro, this is how we play, this is the draft, makes no sense, I think.
Well, it doesn't make sense also because the patch isn't settled, right? Because the thing about Riot is they're going to release the big changes at the end of the year, and then they're going to have to adjust those changes because the changes are so huge that they do every single year that they can't be balanced. So I don't even understand really what's the purpose of practicing on that patch as a team. Like maybe like you're saying, you try and build some synergy or whatever, but you're not getting meaningful practice on the patch in a non-broken fashion. That's not going to change, right? So it's always a crapshoot, and the strategies that you start in that boot camp that close to the big patch being released are not the ones you're going to be actually using in competitive play. And also, now that spring split means even less, you should probably push your practice to as close, or not even practice. Like, here's the thing. Does it really matter that a lot of these teams came in cold? Does it really matter that some of the visa issues have been preventing practice or preventing Broxa from being there? No.
The only team it really matters to is whoever's going to win and go to MSI. So unless you're competing for the top spot, unless you really want to win the split, it doesn't really matter. Like I would say, actually, that's one thing I always thought in League of Legends that was a mistake with the circuit. Is it's true in CSGO, you do hear people complain if they've done like 6 tournaments in 2.5 months or something, that's too much. But I've always thought, actually, CSGO players, because they don't get to be at home too much, they actually like idealize and mythologize what practice at home is like. Like you don't want to just be at home for 2 weeks straight practicing. Maybe you do that if it's the World Championship. Yeah, you want to peak for that one tournament and win the World Championship. But the best practice in most senses, in my opinion, is actual match play. It's to be at a tournament. So if, like in CSGO, you can go to one tournament, and it doesn't matter if you don't do well at this one, you're going to figure some things out in a real match environment. Then you're going to go to the next one and do better. You can use the spring split like that. Like, use the first few weeks to ramp up, see what's wrong with the team, test out, is a player good, is he bad? Like a lot of these concepts that we're trying to do now in LCS are great in theory. Like, I'm going to bring Riom over, and we're going to scrim with him and see if he's any good. You'll never know till he's good till he's in the game. That's just the world. Like, we don't know until he's in an LCS match, unfortunately. It's like all the rest of it. The analogy would be, it's like reading every book in the world on sex before you've ever had sex. You're still not going to make the first time straight fire. You can't just be like, wait a minute, love. Then you go to page 330. Oh, fuck, upside down shit. Like, you can't do that, can you? You just get in there. Got to start going. You know?
That's actually a really good analogy. I can't lie.
But I think spring is going to get removed, no? This is just...
Eventually, it feels like it, right?
They're just preparing us. Oh, it's useless, and then everyone's gonna accept it way easier when it disappears.
Well, but who would be sad about it disappearing now? That's the point I'm making. Is that Riot makes these like wacky incremental changes? Why can't we just have one long season where at halfway point you look at the records and then you have a play-in tournament for NMSI or whatever, right? It doesn't have to be this complicated. It doesn't have to be a step-by-step process to improve it. You know, usually if I can just improve something, you know what I do? I just improve it as much as I possibly can. So
yeah, but if you did that, Monty, that would imply that before you improved
wrong.
You were doing it wrong. And here's one thing you can appreciate about Riot Games is that if not ever admitting you're wrong can be a strength. It can be an ideal to aspire to, right?
It's true. I can't say I don't do that as well. But that said, this isn't about me. This is about Riot Games and them being in a place where they could make big improvements to the season and I think make it more meaningful. But anyway, this is all to say that I think that a lot of these early results, like, you know, the teams aren't warmed up. Like I said, you're getting in the case of Dignitas and I think Immortals, like you're getting a lot of good stuff out of the veterans who have been here for a long time and know how to handle these situations, and they're causing wins in these games. But I don't know if that's necessarily indicative of once teams actually gain synergy because of practice, that's the same stuff we're going to see over time. So,
but even so, though, can I just say, ignore all the context Monty just built up there, and can we just for one moment laugh at the fact that TSM with their super duper lineup did lose to Immortals with sOAZ just got off a plane, and then literally an academy jungler who's like, bloody hell, am I in the real LCS? And they still lost to both those teams. So can we just acknowledge that is funny? It is funny. Okay? I know I think you might say, but it is funny. So,
well, I went for your plan, sOAZ. They just pick engage. I think TSM did the mistake of not banning Ornn, I think. And then enemy took Ornn, Zyrakan, Jarvan, and then just go,
yeah.
You know? It's the easy way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of teams are opting for this way, I guess, but it's so funny. Like, sometimes even though people have a lot of tools in NA, they are not like, you know, in Europe, like, I think one of the biggest thing in Europe, most players are really creative, right? In NA, creativity is below zero. Like, it's really insane.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, at least the LCS broadcast is reflecting that zero creativity. They've really done a great job of representing the play in the region.
Yeah, as above, so below.
Just bring it all back around.
Chemical principle in action in the LCS. Well done. You have mirrored the macro and the micro. Well done. Didn't know you guys were actually into it. Medieval alchemy, but fair play. You know.
I do want to talk about.
I have to go, by the way. Is there a last topic or so?
I do want to talk more about TSM just because I find the whole scenario super funny. And before you go, sOAZ, like, one of the things that was very interesting about TSM was that last night they were up in a huge way. Dardak had a fantastic early game that we saw when they were playing up against Liquid. And one thing that Magic, who runs Oracle's Elixir, actually tweeted out that I thought was super interesting as an early point of discussion, right, is that TSM in their two games, now remember they're 0-2, but at gold difference at 15, they were at 1900 gold difference at 15, which is number one in the LCS after two games. That's nearly double FlyQuest's 1098 gold. So they had almost double the difference between the first and second place team. 100% first blood rate, 100% first tower rate, and yet these guys are losing games. So I think the first question we have to have about TSM is like, once things go off script, once your early game plan out of the draft is gone, who is the one shot calling on this team? Because it has been a disaster. Their dragon control rate is like at 42%. So well, again, they're not doing anything with these advantages.
They're mirroring the macro in the micro. So the organization, it's the same with the team. It's like you've got all that money, and why can't you do anything with it?
I mean, I just wonder how much like Bjergs and because when I think of all the players,
you said Bjergs and they're not drugs, by the way, because that did sound a bit like you said. I wonder how much drugs are involved. It's like, whoa, listen, it's week 1, like that comes in later. The heavy drugs come in like week 8.
No, I wonder how it impacted the team that Bjergs was sick for shot calling or things like that, or even just picks and bans. Like, I mean, I don't know what Yamato thinks about.
What is wrong with him? Does he have the flu or something?
I don't know. He said he was just pretty sick.
Because he did look bad in the games, to be fair. So like,
he's probably just already sick of Dardoch. That's my guess.
But even like just pick, like they went for, I think the enemy team just blind picked Oriana and they picked like Zilean into it. Like, I don't know how good this is. From memory, it doesn't sound that great.
Not so great.
That's his pocket pick, though.
Yeah, and I mean,
Jensen's pocket pick, no? He's like, look at me, I can throw clocks better than you.
Yeah, and also, I mean, that's just my preference thing, but please don't go higher Zilean. Like, I think slow build Zilean is 20 times better. But
do you know the reason why in NA they battle over Zilean picks? Because they know that when the game starts, it's throwing time. I'm wasted on esports shows. I should just quit the esports because I just do stand-up comedy. I can probably make way more money.
Well, it helps, Thorin, that you always laugh at your own jokes too. Like your thing on shows is you only laugh at your own jokes and you just refuse to laugh at anyone else's joke. Because here's how Thorin's mind works.
No, I do. My brain. I just think Thorin, that's funny.
So what happens with Thorin in these shows is like, sometimes I make a good joke or a pun and he'll just sit there stone-faced because what he does is he sits there and he's just thinking about the next joke he's going to make the whole time. So no other jokes can like penetrate his mind.
No, I do credit it. Like I say in my mind, I just go, that's funny. But then I just think, then I'm thinking of my joke. Yeah, you're right.
So that's why we can only, I just give up on making jokes a lot of the time. It's okay, Thorin. You can have all the
anyway,
jokes.
back to TSM.
Back to TSM. The real joke.
I agree with the draft point. I think also like the mistake of like if you pick a Zilean, your AD carry better be some shit that can pop off. You know, Misfortune is not. going to be
and they went.
That pops
oh yeah, so to add on this, sorry to interrupt you. So they go like Zilean MF, right? Which you said is not great. I agree. And then Misfortune go Last Whisper, third item. And they have only Ornn as a tank. Misfortune is never gonna kill Ornn, even if he goes Last Whisper. So Misfortune can never deal against Oriana plus Xayah because he's trying to make a build to kill the tank. Like he just like it made no sense actually.
Heavy outdraft, I think. Heavy.
Well, it was just depressing because it looked like they were really going to get some momentum in the early game. Double lift, like dying, then TPing back in to die again. And Dardoch actually...
It was funny, actually.
It was funny. I mean, you could tell Liquid's rusty too, right? Like that was a sort of question mark play coming into the start of that one. But to Double Lift's credit, he still had a huge CS advantage for most of the game. They decided to go ahead and swap up the lanes to make sure that he was going to get back ahead and get into the game. So he didn't let it rattle him or anything like that. Yeah, it was kind of silly, but... again, it's that conversion that we see, is incapable from TSM. And I didn't even know what was going on in that game where Broken Blade was playing Rumble because they just farted around the map and wasted all the time that they had in the mid game to take advantage of Rumble. And then the late game itemization was also like weird. Like, when he built Morello Namicon, I was like, am I going crazy here? I've been out of the scene for a while, so sometimes I make the mistake of doubting myself. As if there's something that's, fundamentally changed, or I'm like, do I understand the game anymore? No, it's the children who are wrong. But it was one of those times where I was like, why are we seeing this Morello Namicon in this scenario? Because what Rumble needs to do is engage. He's not going to be able to do enough damage in the late game, so why not pick an item that will actually allow the Rumble to engage? And you're also You're also not going to be able to side lane against the Aatrox. So having the healing reduction, not awesome, I think. What was your take? Did you notice that itemization as well, Yamato?
Yeah, I think it's like it's not going to change the matchup into Aatrox. It's not going to make a difference. So I think it's a wrong purchase. I think also with like Rumble is just completely misplaced because the only thing that he does is makes it worse for LeBlanc later on in the game. Senna Tam sit on mid lane, LeBlanc Lee hover, and then you just need an AD champ to make sure that Aatrox can't stack MR. But instead, he's a Rumble. He's making sure that the Aatrox can buy more Immortals, buy Mercuries, and feel really good about it. So LeBlanc split push pressure is going to be very late. LeBlanc bought Banshee, which means that you want to force fight. But the issue, I think, like the biggest issue is that there are 4 TSM players just sitting on the mid lane like this, thinking they are a poke comp. Senna achieving highest healing done ever in the history of League of Legends, because that's the only thing that we were seeing for such a long time. He had rapid fire cannon, maybe can walk up and hit something, but instead they're just standing there, when in reality, like Rumble should sit in fog, Lee Sin should sit in fog, Immortals should be pressured to walk up as 4. They should be angled towards one side. And then all of a sudden, when you flank with Lee Sin, LeBlanc, and you collapse with Rumble, and you use the Rumble ult and the Senna ultimate, all of a sudden something can happen. But nothing ever happened because you were just looking like this. Hello? Okay, you poking us? Okay, what are we going to do in return? Maybe try a barbecue, It's like, it was just...
You've nailed it. Yeah, exactly. Listen, I've been in games like this. You're trapped in a game that's going 1 hour, where the team that's winning can't end. You may as well bring a book. Wait for that one.
Yes.
It's a slow burner, that one. But,
I don't know, man. Like,
I'm going to have to leave you soon.
Oh, no. Okay, well, sOAZ is going to have to leave, which means that we are going to talk more about LCS.
Yes.
After a quick break, we have a video, the Cloud9 roundup, to play for you, so you can enjoy me being a cowboy. For like 3 minutes, people are going to go to the bathroom, and then we're going to be back with just Yamato to talk about LEC and more about LCS. I want to talk about Cloud9 a little bit and some of the other teams. Thank you, sOAZ. Enjoy your lovely day of scrims.
I'm sad I will miss the best part, but thank you for inviting.
It's all right. You can always come back on later.
See ya, guys.
Thanks, bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Howdy, buckaroos and buckarettes. I'm MonteCristo, and once again I'm here with the Cloud9 Roundup, bringing you all that Cloud9 news from this week's events. Got some bad news to start off with this week. Unfortunately, the Cloud9's Counter-Strike Global Offensive team is no longer going to be playing in the DreamHack Open in Leipzig. They finished with an 0-2 loss to the Renegades, my old team, before they could get into the playoffs. Also, Mango, now he didn't make that top finish. He instead was eliminated by Hungrybox in the losers final of Melee Singles at Genesis, although he did lose just 2-3, getting that 3rd place bronze medal. Good luck to Mango in his next competition. But it's not all bad news over here at Cloud9. Of course, many of you are going to be familiar with the League of Legends team, starting off with a flawless 2-0 record in the Spring Split of the LCS. Now, they did beat Team Liquid, who doesn't have their full-time jungler Broxa, but a win's a win all the same. And man, did they dominate. Little over 25 minutes was all it took to take down the reigning LCS champions. Cloud9 looking to continue that record as they head forward. On Sunday, we saw Cloud9 playing against the Golden Guardians, including former Cloud9 members Golden Glue and Keith. Another easy win here for Cloud9. They come into the season with a whole heap of scrims under their belt, and they are looking to start things off hot and claim that LCS Spring Split trophy. But it's not only the League of Legends LCS team that's doing well. You got to keep your eyes peeled for that Academy roster. 1-1, 50% doing all right as they take out Team Liquid Academy, but unfortunately losing to the Golden Guardians Academy squad. Still, Cloud9 remains the best team in the LCS when it comes to bringing up traditional, homegrown North American players. And we love that about Cloud9, so keep your eyes on Academy for the LCS stars of tomorrow.
Finally, we have some Apex Legends news to talk about. 2020 is going to be a big year as Apex Legends spins up its competitive scene, starting, of course, with the major in Texas. $500,000 of prize money is on the line, and now Cloud9, with their ace PvPX and his teammates, Nasky and Yeesh, have qualified for that major. Be sure to tune in to Apex Legends, in my opinion, the most watchable battle royale, in the coming weeks to see exactly how Cloud9's team does. Well, that's it for this week's Cloud9 Roundup with me, MonteCristo. Hope you've enjoyed us bringing a little twang to your news, and I'll see you once again next week.
We're here. We're back. 9/7 Insight, presented by AT&T. We finally did it. I put people in boxes. I'm the dream producer.
Nice.
So proceed to the video section.
All right. So we're still going to talk about LCS for a bit. So let's start by talking about 100 Thieves, because that's an interesting one. Obviously, a lot of fans there. Ryoma was incredibly underwhelming during his games that we saw him play. That Rise game we saw last night, where he would basically, he lost a 1v1 right before Dragon spawn, gave up Dragon, put immense pressure on the game. Guy really seems like he doesn't.
At times, he literally couldn't even farm the minions. I'm not exaggerating even when I say that. That's not like a troll. Like he looked like he had literal nerves and jitters just playing the game.
I think it's understandable though. Coming from,
it's kind of strange.
It's kind of strange. I mean, remember that he's taking up an import slot, but also that the Spring Split is relatively meaningless, so this is a chance for him to get a bunch of professional games under his belt to see what they have. They could always go back and sign another player. Their academy mid laner is still Soligo, I think. So
please.
Not sure that's going to be the best one.
The only thing is, Monty, you know this. In the occult world, right? They believe very heavily in like the power of names, because I mean it's actually to do with gematria and the idea that the universe itself is tied into the meaning of numbers and letters and stuff. But the point I'm making is you have to be very careful what you name yourself, because that can obviously then manifest into reality. You might think it's just a joke. I can be called anything. So if you call your org 100 Thieves, and then every year loads of big names just come over, get massive contracts, play like absolute garbage, and are basically check stealers, like. You did it to yourself, mate. Like, I'd have called myself 100 champions or something like, or best team in LCS. That'd be mad. Thorin's best team in LCS. We'd be winning every year. Joke's on you.
If only they had
Team
thought
Solo
of that.
Mid, how did that work out for him? Exactly. Team Liquid just crying every year after Worlds. We can go down the list,
I really think, like, I don't know if they're stealing checks, because obviously Ryoma wasn't going to be a big check player coming in.
I imagine he's probably a budget player. This is a consideration to make.
This is definitely a play that they're trying to develop some talent, and they came out with this new announcement that they're having this they've signed like a bunch of players who are not eligible to play in LCS yet because they're too young, like 100 Thieves next or whatever. So they're trying to create sort of a development system under their academy system. Now,
Thieves Junior.
It is sort of worth noting that 100 Thieves has yet to actually develop a player that is LCS caliber. They do not have a player on their roster that they've currently developed. They are attempting to develop Ryoma, and we'll see how long that's going to last. So I don't know.
I honestly don't know what to think, man, because I feel like someday is far past his peak. I don't think that's ever going to return. And
he's the best player on this team right now.
Yeah,
that doesn't say a lot, though.
Yeah,
that's part of the problem, Monty.
Because I was listening to the cast and they were like, "Yeah, someday is the best laning top laner in the league," and I'm like, "Yeah, maybe 4 years ago or something."
So who's the best laning top laner in the league right now?
Like
Frog on my side lanes.
Frog is the best at every position.
It's just strange to me, like Ryoma is the risk, and then they have players that have been around for a very long time. So in terms of progression, if they don't come out swinging, because that's what veteranship is supposed to bring you, there's some sense of shot calling, some sense of gameplay, some kind of direction, similar to like Dignitas. just because they started now, what is it, 0-2? They lost both games, or did they win because of the steal? They won with the steal?
They won their first game, but it was a
That's
fiesta.
a loss in my book.
It was the Golden Guardians game as well.
It was Golden Guardians, and it was an ugly game.
Because I just struggle to imagine them breaching. I understand playoffs is now top 8 in North America, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
It is, right?
Yeah, because you start in the lower bracket if you're like 7th and 8th, I think, right? Am I right on that?
I think it's 5th or 6th is how it works.
Oh, it's still just top 6 then.
I'm pretty sure it's still top
top
6. Yes,
Because
it's
I can't
still
imagine
top
them
6.
breaking top 6. I just, it's difficult for me to imagine one of the Thieves to break top 6. Like Ziggs is great. He has a good track record, and Papa Smithy is great, but that's the only thing the players are talking about as well, and a lot of the analysis is also coming around these two guys, and at one point you have to start to ask yourself, are the players good enough? And I don't get that feeling from this roster, but of course it's just week 1, so they can surprise me.
I mean, I think it's interesting because, like, obviously they made some decisions in terms of their roster by getting Cody's son and giving up Bang, which probably saved them a bunch of money, if I had to guess, and side grade, I'd say, with Bang's current form over the last couple of years. So I think if you look at what they had, I think they did a lot with the resources that they had available to them, like having Someday still on contract, having that veteran presence, top laners being in short supply, and then getting Meteos back on the roster was probably pretty good. The real question mark here for me is just Ryoma, right? That's where you really have to wonder whether Damonte would have been a better option. But at the same time, I think part of the logic is that Damonte, we've seen a year of Damonte's play. If you don't believe that Damonte has a very high ceiling, then why not at least roll the dice on Ryoma, especially in spring season when there's no real penalty for doing so. I guess what's nice about spring now is you do get 18 games to sort of work out your kinks. I don't personally want to watch that, but that's fine.
Like, obviously, you have players that, especially the name value, a bunch of these players look good on paper. It doesn't look like the worst. Like, when your eye first sees the 100 Thieves roster, you don't instantly think terrible. It's not like the Golden Guardians one. You think, oh, there's some spots here where they're good. Obviously, Meteos could, in theory, be the best jungler if he gets everything together. The problem is this. You would think from last year they would have learned the lesson. The one position you don't want to be having the worst player that has to prove himself is mid lane. Like, if anything, in NA, mid lane is like the carry role. There's a reason why, like, you can have Crown and Froggen on bad teams and they can carry you to wins from that role. Like, that's not the one I want my, like, rookie who's never played to be in. Unless, I mean, the angle is, as you said, you're gambling that he becomes really good and he did it for cheap. But that's the point of gambling. You can lose. When you gamble without great odds, you can lose all your money.
I mean, there's also the other question, which goes like this. So if you have this roster and you have an academy roster that's coached by Kelsey Moser and is trying to be developmental, and you're going to be putting out 100 Thieves next roster, so you're committing to development, then listen through this. So this is the logic that you're operating under, right, as an organization. Then why, if you don't think Soligo is ready to play on the LCS, then why wouldn't you get rid of Soligo, put Ryoma on your academy roster, and then get Damonte to start for your team, and then or Pobelter, and then if Ryoma gets better in academy, or you can do a strategy in spring like sub in Ryoma for 50% of your LCS scrims. Why don't you just do that? Instead,
I will say, like, the problem I have with the whole developing players thing is, first of all, it's the most classic PR lie that just translates to, I don't have the money, or didn't want to buy a really good player. Like, nobody goes, right, I have 100 million in the bank. Should I buy Faker or try and develop the next Faker? That's not even an equation, is it? Like, you just buy Faker if you can. So, first of all, it's just not usually true, is it? And then secondly, even when it's true, like that, except for rare examples, like maybe when Team Liquid brought Dardoch and Matt and those guys up, and then Cloud9 when they brought Blabber and Ziz, except for rare examples, and a few now in Europe that are doing it, in NA at least, you never use those academy players anyway. Like, just look at TSM. That's like being in prison, being in their academy squad. Like, you have all the scrutiny of being on TSM, but you never get to play in TSM. Even it's like literally, they could literally have anyone get kicked out of the team, and then they're like, "Is there anyone else in the world except my academy player I can put in right now?" Like, I'll go ahead and predict it right now. I don't even know who's on 100 Thieves Academy, but here's my prediction, right? Not more than one of those players will ever be a starter for the 100 Thieves organization. Take that prediction to the bank, go back in time, like a time capsule in 3 years, see whether I was right. So at the end of that, what you'll have to look back on and say, was that development right? Because the other angle as well is, even if you do develop them to become good, who's to say they join your team? They don't have a 5-year contract. Like, the point is, if they become good, now you're in a bidding war like everyone is. Like, well, that's actually how they ended up with Ryoma, if people don't know. It's like Papa Smithy had the in that he was good, but there was also like a little mini bidding war for that player. Like, people were trying him out, looking at him. It wasn't like they just picked him out of nowhere. You know, there's a few people were interested.
Yeah, it's like I think your analogy is it's like that classic Family Guy moment where Peter is like they win a boat, right, or the mystery box, and it's like, you know, what's the mystery box? It could be anything. It could be even be a boat. I feel like the same thing in a lot of these teams. They're like, well, we could get Pobelter, or we could get this guy. He could be anything, maybe even Pobelter, right? So there is an argument for that level of stability and also not taking up an import slot with Pobelter. And the fact that no one wanted him and he's a coach now is really weird to me.
Especially considering some of the mids. It's not like we have the craziest mids ever. Like, the Ica guy's not that good. Ryoma hasn't done anything yet. Like, I thought here's the thing, that him and DeMonte aren't like good enough. I'm going to argue they must be in the league. Like, that's not the way the game works. It's not some sort of socialist nightmare where like we have to evenly distribute all the good players. Like, no, like, you're allowed to say that guy's just all right. I'll gamble for something better. The problem I have is I never personally bought the idea that the gamble was ever really going to work out. So we'll wait and see on these ones.
It's just a strategy, right? Like, the strategy could have been put Ryoma in on your academy roster, try and develop him, split time with scrims in spring and get a known quantity. They've decided to just all in on Ryoma, and I do think people are
some faith in Kelsey Moser. Like, she took that young Korean kid someday who'd never done anything in an LCS, and she brought him to a level where he became a champion, and now he's in the main squad. That's a tale for us all to look to and aspire to.
I do think, like, just give it a little bit though. I don't want to overreact on the Ryoma stuff because, again, it's spring split. It's not a lot of practice. It's the first stage games. Guys coming out of OPL where he was dominant in that league, and it's just about being a fish in a bigger pond now, right? So I really don't want to overreact to anything. Like we said earlier, a lot of these teams have not had the most amount of practice in the universe. So
thing about Ryoma is we don't know yet. Maybe it's not his destiny to be a top player in the Western regions. But if that's so, I hope the FBI will look into whether there's some sort of whatever. You see where I was going on that one. You see where I was going on that one.
I would be impressed if you could make
I
thought I was going to be impressed if you could make a pun out of Schernfire as well. But that's the real tough one.
That's true.
I wanted to add on the Ryoma point. Is you guys don't stop talking, man.
You got to just yell.
You guys are just after what we talked about earlier. You guys are competing for jokes now. It's with Ryoma as well. The game he played against Zuzuka that everyone's flaming him for, the impact that Svenskeren and Zazel had in mid lane was 50 times higher than their respective roles. They just didn't know how to impact mid lane. And sure, you can argue that the mid laner has a big role in this too, but when you're left alone, when you're playing Rise against LeBlanc, you're not going to win. And at the same time, you know, this is going to be people are going to be shocked when I say this probably, but I think Zuzuka at the end of this year is going to be the best mid lane by far in North America.
I mean, he played out of his mind last night.
And this was just a little teaser, you know, this was just a little teaser. It was the same way in the game against Dignitas. They had a good setup to win the entire game because Zuzuka burned Oriana's flash on his own, and they also killed him. They just didn't know how to transfer this into a bigger lead. In this game, they actually figured out how to play around mid lane, and Ryoma was the victim. And sure, he had moments where he shouldn't have died and he got caught, but in general, that is a very difficult game to play when both Svenskeren and Zazel know how to impact mid lane super, super well. So for me, EG is the dark horse, you know? There's a dark horse that could shake up things big time, I think.
So you were
By the way,
you were Zuzuka's coach. All right.
No,
continue.
this is the problem. I know that he meant just as a general statement, like taking all context out. That sounds crazy. Like Zuzuka will be the best mid in the region. Like, problem is that isn't actually that crazy that you would say that. Coach of Zuzuka, who took you to your best ever place.
I can tell you why.
You know,
sure, there's a hint of bias, of course, but I think the last year was a very, very big development year for Zuzuka, because in spring there were health issues, and in summer we had team issues that just go beyond the individual player. Right? We didn't know how to play past a certain point. We didn't know how to play from behind. We started at the point that was the lowest in the history of this alteration of vitality. So we had a lot of growing to be done. I thought I even look back at this year, and I think it's a miracle that we even got to playoffs, with the level we were at. And so I look back at that, I'm happy about it. But in terms of Zuzuka, I think with the combination of his experience, the first year, he's the type of player that is going to mechanically be able to play and roll with the absolute best. When I say absolute best, I'm thinking about the big names, rookie or whatever. He's not going to be like for example, Niski at the World Championship, when he laned against Caps, it was like, okay, there is a significant difference here. You're not going to have a chance. You just have no chance instantly, no matter how hard Wunder and Jankos are ending. You just have no chance because of the difference in mid. And I think Zuzuka, with this development of how he's taking care of it, look at the guy in the interview. He's lost insane amounts of weight. He takes care of himself outside of the game, and has figured out all of these issues that were outside of the game, right? And I think with this team, with the history of Svenskeren and Zazel, I think they know how to play around mid lane super, super well. I remember the Jensen days when they were playing around mid lane and figuring stuff out, and they were actually winning against good teams, and they were difficult to deal with. I think this is a very lethal combination. The only person I don't know about is Kumo. And I think just because Zuzuka has this ability to push himself mechanically and to be able to roll with the absolute best, I think this is the play you kind of want to bet on. Similar to what Caps used to be, he was willing to take big risks. These are the players that become the best players in their position.
For what it's worth, taking a look at Zuzuka's stats after a couple of games, he does have the highest percentage of any mid laner of post 15-minute farm. So he's sitting at about 30.1% of EG's total farm after 15 minutes. So they are feeding him. Like, they're very intentionally. So I think there's two factors to this. One of which is that in that game he played last night on LeBlanc, he was one of the only LCS players that figured out that LeBlanc could go into a side lane, and therefore he collected a lot more farm than other LeBlanc players. But also he was pressing his league and putting pressure on the map really well. I think Zuzuka had an outstanding game yesterday when it came to translating that win. Basically, like you said, he got help in the early game, but then he got the solo kill onto Ryoma, which then translated into a dragon, so we got an objective control, and then he's just flipping out, diving people in the side lanes and causing a lot of the poke damage. And if we look at the current meta and the way that things are developing at the start of this year, a lot of it has been LeBlanc sort of poking, and so much of the game right now is about poke, because the dragons are so important, and like stacking dragons is so important. So you're seeing much more methodical play around these dragons, which is about vision, poking. So Yamato, when you come in and you see this, do you think that poke comps are going to be sort of a staple of this meta because of the importance of dragon in the early game?
I think poke and engage is the simple way of playing things. Even though people are hyping up things like Ornn has the lowest win ratio out of any top laner in the entire competitive scene, counting LPL, LEC, and LCS. So I think this is the simple way of playing things. I think if you are a worse team, especially in the beginning, this is an easy way to rack up victories. It's another reason why I thought Schalke is going to win a couple of games, because I think I thought they were going to play the same way every single game, just same input, 3-man bottom, get an advantage, and then just snowball. But it just didn't happen. So I've lost faith completely in Schalke, but that's a whole different conversation. Usually the teams that simplify get wins in the beginning of things. And then later on, teams figure out how to play different things with their LeBlanc. For example, T-Sim's composition against Immortals. That was a good draft besides the Rumble, because they had the conditions to defend mid-tower with Tamkinch and Senna. Very difficult to break that. They had the best 2v2, arguably, right now in the game with LeBlanc and Lee Sin. Very easy to set up, very easy to snowball. But they just didn't know how to play a 2-2-1. They didn't know how to flank. They didn't know how to do these extra steps. G2, for example, they don't draft these compositions with the tanks or with the poke. They play the more complicated way of playing. There was this big team fight against Mad Lions where Perkz was flanking, they were baiting abilities, and they are just next level when it comes to how they approach the mid and late game. And this will come with time, always with time. So I agree, in the beginning, poke compositions, engage compositions, simplifying gives you wins, but I think this also kind of shoots yourself in the leg for what you want to do in the later parts of the league. I remember when G2 were playing Funnel over and over, and I just knew, I had this feeling, everyone else had this feeling, Funnel is going to get removed from the game because obviously Riot Games hates that this is happening, you know?
It was
G2 was investing. G2 was investing so much time into playing Funnel, and I was like, we're not going to touch Funnel, we're going to be good at playing against Funnel, and those skills are going to transfer well. Like, who gives a shit if Jankos played a lot of Braum? That's not going to improve him as a player, because we saw when Funnel was gone and he was jungling again, it looked very, very sloppy, right? So the same way, I think the teams that are starting off at a good point, for example, Dignitas, the way they showed C9, I think they're also setting themselves up for better success later down the line. So you can simplify for some victories, but what is your end goal, right?
So let me ask a different question. Do you think that this emphasis on Dragon is going to continue? Because there's one of the things I really like about this patch is that there's the 2 Rift Heralds now. So you can make a meaningful choice about whether you're going to play top or bottom side, and whether you're going to try and go for Heralds and try and snowball a gold lead, and then come back later on and try and stop Dragons 3 or 4. Like, giving up a couple doesn't matter as long as you're confident you can snowball a gold lead or a pressure lead if you kill early turrets into later dragons, right? Because we can say early dragons are not super important. It's really just hitting that 4 mark that things get crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Like, individual drakes are honestly, they're dog shit. Like, in terms of gold value, what they provide is just non-existent, and it just comes down to the big fight at the 4th drake. There were timings in the TSM versus Immortals game where they were looking to trade the Herald and top pressure for the Drake, but they just mis-executed. They didn't dive the Ezreal that was farming the top wave for free. So this is a very obscure example, but I think, the TSM Immortals game is the perfect example, because if they funnel that gold into LeBlanc, all of a sudden it's going to shift the entire game, because if LeBlanc is strong enough to beat Aatrox inside, or strong enough to one-shot someone, this is going to just change the whole dynamic of a team fight. So I think as teams progress, I think there is a level of playing through bottom, controlling Drake, and then after 6-minute mark, 8-minute mark, already transfer yourself into Rift Herald. So there is a sense of you can still play through bottom and achieve the same thing. But I think when you look at a trade, let's say you trade maybe 750 gold for a Drake. I think in some cases, this concentrated gold can shift the whole landscape for how the game will be played. And then on that 4th Drake, you can be stronger. So I think, once again, it follows the same line of thought from the previous conversation, where people just want to simplify. Having the idea, okay, we play for Drake. This makes it very easy. It rings a bell in everyone's mind. And eventually it will become more and more complicated.
You have to remember, YamatoCannon is European. So you asked about the Dragon, but he spent more time talking about the Drake than a Source magazine reader. I had a different alternate joke depending on where he ended there.
What tilts me is that I think technically they are called Drakes, but it still says Dragon has been slain in the UI. So
I wouldn't expect the lore to be coherent in League of Legends, but as we discussed many times over,
It has been confusing. So we should, before we transition to LEC, I'd like to talk about Cloud9, because they actually are 2-0, and also we have to talk about them.
Right, listen. First of all, I'm the designated Cloud9 hitter on the show. There has to be one to provide balance to the force. I'm just going to say this, right? Listen, I love banter. I love it when owners like Ocelot in Europe get involved with a bit of banter, a bit of cheeky back and forth on Twitter. But when Jack made that tweet this week where he said something like, guess Cloud9 lost off season. By the way, it's sarcasm. So he was already resorting to kind of a passive aggressive approach there. He wasn't just coming out and saying what up now, biatch or whatever. I said to myself again, whatever. You know, Jiminy crack corn, I've got you now after that. So he didn't come out and do that, did he? But here's the problem, right? That statement would be straight fire if he'd just come straight in. They'd played TSM off the bat. They'd played, like, I don't know, another big name team. But here's the problem, right? Let's look at the 2-0, that Cloud9, this incredible 2-0 that definitely shows they didn't lose the offseason. So they played Team Liquid. Whoa, Thorin, 4-time champions. Academy jungler. Never had any experience. Academy jungler, literally not the real team. Literally the guy who they used to have as a jungler is a legend of the role. Okay, fair enough. Game 1, that's all right. We'll keep going on. Obviously, listen, Academy Jungler is still good enough to get in TSM's ass, but that's a side topic. So then we go to game 2. Maybe it picked up for game 2. Oh, you're not going to believe this, guys. They only laid the smackdown on Golden Glue and the Golden Guards. Whoa! Oh, shit. Like, it's like that super hot fire, like a guy's, oh! Are you kidding me, Jack? What are you talking about? The real games haven't even begun yet. That was like the preseason. Listen, save that tweet for like week 3. It's a pretty good tweet, but like, it's not that good right now, is it? Like, you blew that one too early. You just went. I know you were hyped. Everyone was probably thinking you were going to go 2-0, but you went too ham on that one.
I do think, but here's the other question, Thorin, is like, who are they going to beat where that becomes valid, right? Maybe
I will say I agree with sOAZ. The problem is at the moment everyone's bad.
Everyone's bad. Like, who are you styling on? So the problem with that logic is like, at the end of the day, who is he supposed to style on? You might as well just style this week, because it's not like, you know, are we going to say, we'd say the exact same thing in 3 weeks' time, most likely, because a lot of these teams are still going to be looking bad. That said,
and also the big names just aren't good at the moment, like TSM, and obviously Team Liquid doesn't have the real life. So I get there's an angle on it, but I'm just saying, like, it wasn't as crazy as he was making it sound. You know, like,
no,
whatever. We'll dial it back a bit.
Let's take a look at some stats by Microsoft. I know you're a big fan, because we saw Blabber versus Surenfire obviously this week. Surenfire, unfortunately, in the position where he had to go up against somebody who actually does have a lot of LCS experience and synergy with the team. But I think Blabber, you know, a lot of people, we should start talking about this, because the big point was, Svenskaren's gone. He's the MVP of the league. Blabber didn't do a great job of playing at the World Championship. So what does it mean that Blabber's in right now? And he played 2 games of Lee Sin, and you know what? He looked really good in the early game, honestly. Like, I still think he is learning his limits in the late game.
For him, obviously.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good one to put him on.
You know,
I think when it comes to junglers as well, like, I put them in 2 categories. Those who are allowed to play Lee Sin and those who are not. And there are way more in the bucket of don't play Lee Sin. Yes. Blabber is definitely one of them. And I think in terms of C9 and overall of how they're playing in terms of the early game, also the game-winning kick. Well, Team Liquid was already down, but the way he kicked Surenfire in the head to secure the Nash was kind of, you know,
it was stylish.
Yes.
I mean, he's a good mechanical player. So here's a prediction for you. I promise you, at least one time this season, Blabber's Lee Sin is going to lose Cloud9 again, because he's going to go in too aggressively, overplay his hand.
That comes with the territory of being that type of player, though. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you know, and I was talking to Reapert about this, and he and I agree that it's much better to have a player who's too aggressive, because it's a lot easier to dial it in. And you actually want them to be too aggressive, because otherwise you can't learn your limits. If you're always just playing scared, then you're not going to learn what you can and can't do. So this is definitely a player under development, but his early game's really strong. I just think we need to look more at the late game. And we also have some stats here for Niski and Golden Glue. We saw some questionable mid lane play in the NALCS this week.
To be fair, I'll give props, because we've got him on screen now, to my boy Jack, actually. In a way, Jack, the problem there is, again, I was going from my worldview, and in my worldview, that was a ridiculous statement. But actually, you're a genius. You're like Vince McMahon. You built up this jobber called Golden Glue. You get him play the odd game in like a playoff. You're like, oh, he's got a career and he's in the hyperbolic time chamber. It's like, mate, he may as well spend the rest of his life in there. Like, there's nothing to change. So anyway, and then finally, you go, oh, it's with a heart full of regret that I let Golden Glue go to, I don't know, the last place team in the league or something. And then when he goes there, you're like, oh, snap, Niski just beat up Golden Glue. What up now? Like, well done. You created that entire narrative, Jack. That never existed. Fair play.
All right.
Well done.
All right. So we did see Niski have some good Zoe games. So he also played the Veigar in the first one, right? But, I mean, he actually showed how to poke on this champion, which was something that Aka couldn't do in earlier.
He's one of his best champions. He's played for basically this whole career.
Yeah. And I think Niski, is he going to be a superstar level mid laner? Maybe not, but he does have some, like, he can play around his team strategy so well and be very good in terms of these poke champions or playing the Glacial Augment Veigar and providing the CC to set up for his teammates. So I like Niski a lot as a role player on this team.
I think it works with the rest of the lineup. I think Licorice is one of the best top laners in NA. And like, I just came from Cabo Shot scrimming against the top laners that were where we had Licorice in our group, right? So we didn't scrim against C9, of course, but scrimming against the other team's top laners, which were like big names. That was kind of underwhelming for Cabo. And Licorice was still underwhelming for him, he told me, but slightly better than the other two. So I think Licorice is good. I think I'm very excited about the bot lane, Sven and Vulcan. Sven looks completely reinvigorated. And I think on a team where you have players that can compete for the best position in yourself, like best position, it is okay to have like a Pobelter in the mid lane type of player, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, you can look at the stats right now, which are the overall 2019, so last year's stats for Golden Glue and Niski, and you'll notice that Niski, lower in gold per minute, lower in XP per minute. He is a low resource mid laner who still provides a lot of value, because if you look at these stats, you'd say, oh wow, Golden Glue is, you know, pretty even or ahead in most of these major categories, but that doesn't actually reflect the fact that, you know, the resources are more. You don't have to put as much into Niski in order for him to have more of an effect on the Rift. So I think it's an interesting comparison between these two guys. And I also want to talk a little bit about Keith, because
let's just say one of them has square glasses, the other one has round glasses, different styles there, you know, just like the mid lane. So when I was watching the Golden Guardians game this week, I was like, ooh, Keith not looking so hot there. And I'm like, I do want, you know, who's on Golden Guardians Academy? Maybe they have a support player that they could bring in. And so I like pull up my phone, go over to League PD. I'm like, Golden Guardians Academy. Who's it? Oh, it's Huhi. So we have no support players on either of these teams. Exactly.
Fantastic. I know. When I heard the story of how they reached this conclusion, it was like, Keith, you want to support? Okay.
Well, the genius is, if you were never that good at one role anyway, you can get up to your old level at most roles pretty quickly. He's basically a fill player, just a career fill player.
It's just...
And
it will go down as one of the.
By the way, speaking of by the way, how we convinced all these teams to pay him these salaries? Yeah, I don't know. That is amazing. That's like there should be like a movie with Tom Cruise playing him, where it's like a heist movie. It's like, how is he getting away with this? Like smoke and mirrors the whole way. Like, I don't know how it's amazing. It's like incredible. But here's the one thing I'll say, right? Is speaking again of people whose media presence was disproportionate to the reality. If anyone saw any of the media, any of the interviews around the Golden Guardians player, they were doing that classic thing where everyone looks at your lineup and quite justifiably goes, well, that lineup looks trash, so probably be the worst, right? And then they go, I think we're going to be the worst. And it's like, now's the moment though, guys. This is the next sentence out your mouth is the turning point. Because if you actually didn't believe you were trash, you'd do what everyone else does in a completely fresh season when no games have been played. You'd say, think we're trash, we're going to win the champion. No, what they said is like, you think we're 10th? We're at least like, I don't know, 6, make the playoffs. Like, exactly. Exactly. You don't go straight for the moon, do you? You know deep down it's like, we're at least 8th best. Like, you know, it's like, child, please, just let it go.
All right. Are we done talking about LCS? I don't know if I can handle this.
Yeah,
anymore.
Let's do a little bit of LEC.
Like, we should actually talk about teams that looked, frankly, significantly better. I think that I was surprised by sort of the play of mid-table teams that we saw in the LCS or LEC.
The depth is really good.
Yeah, the depth seems actually really good this season. So that was impressive. I admired the way that some of these teams were applying pressure on the map, and they looked a lot more polished to start the season than the LCS did.
There was even teams in LEC that lost the game. Mad Lions is a good example, and actually showed things in the loss that made you think they could be a good team. I mean, for a start off, by the way, you must be loving it, Monty, right? You used to be literally paid for a living to just watch Korean League of Legends all day long. Like, oh, I'm loving this. Oh, it's amazing. And now you're having to watch LCS every game. You're just locked in there like Malcolm and Clockwork Orange. Like, please, can I stop? And you're like, nah, this is your life now. And the best thing is, as you said, you're watching the game, and Monty, what is Monty famous for? Rotations, map movement, put pressure on. So he's watching the whole time, like, any minute now, go to the side play.
Just the NA-RAM, man.
Paging NA mid to the side lane, please. And then they're like, sorry, boss, I've got to just take care of something in the mid lane. Let's fight. And it's like, that's why when Zuzuka goes to the side lane, everyone in NA is just like, because they're just like, it's like in Mario when you jump on one of those pipes, they're like, oh, get off that, Zuzuka. The plant comes out there and kills you, and he goes down it like, oh, what's he doing? Where's he going? What, he's in a bonus level, he's getting all gold and stuff. It's amazing. Like, meanwhile, you go over to Europe, that's what Origins is doing all the time. They're just side laning, aren't they? Nuke upstairs. It's brilliant. Everyone's loving it.
Really what I think is, here's what I think happened. I think NA was, they started, China starts winning the world championship, and NA's like, yes, that's brilliant. We're going to start copying China. And then they pull up Chinese VODs from like 3 years ago, and they just start copying what used to happen in China before China got good, where everybody just ran into the mid lane and fought all the time. It's like, no, you want to copy the modern pressure and skirmish version of Chinese League of Legends. We don't need to go back to the 5v5 chaos style sandbag era of LPL. But that's somewhat of what it feels like LCS is doing right now. So yes, it is a unique form of torture that I have opted into. I will say that. By
the way, just for any historians of the show, like when we did the first episode, I even myself noted as a timestamp, like, right, 21 minutes in, first reference to Reckless there. So 1 hour 53 in episode 2 of season 2, reference of chaos style already. We're bringing back all the old. Now, we're gradually building up the lexicon again, Monty, so that we can do a lot of our old material, basically. Yeah.
That's right. You got to bring the self-reference back. You got to bring the self-reference back. All right. So which teams are you enjoying watching? And what do you want to talk about, Yamato and LEC? Because we saw some good stuff, like Origin looked pretty fun. Rogue. People liked Rogue a lot, and I was watching them, and they kind of they got a break, like kind of caught a break in their second game.
Why don't we do this? I've got a format, right? I'm going to make a new segment right now where I'll decide the first 3 teams we talk about using the classic template of the good, the bad, and the ugly. All right. So we're going to start with the good.
Fits the cowboy theme from earlier.
The good can be Rogue. There's a great example because a lot of people were obviously hyped for this roster, YamatoCannon. A bunch of them, were like rookies last year, but they kind of proved themselves. And you look at the lineup now and they've added Hansama. Justifiably, people think this can actually be a potential champion, maybe.
I think the pick of Hansama is just perfect because when Hansama had his most, his biggest, his breakout year when they had the rookie year with Alfari and Ignar and Power of Evil, and they went all the way to the World Championship.
And Max Law, we can still say his name. He's not dead. He's just
I just forgot about him.
For now. Yeah,
I just forgot about him. So it's
I tried to forget about him as well, but
just not too many big fishes, not too many big personalities.
Yes.
This seems to be a perfect position for Hansama, where he has a support that takes charge, like Igna does, and his Blitzcrank, whatever the fuck you want to pick him. And I think Schalke fits a very similar mold. Not too many big personalities, a support that communicates for him, because Hansama is very, very good mechanically. But sometimes you saw with the disaster of a Misfits roster, when they had this crazy year or shit year, everything kind of fell apart. And when Hansama came back, when he subbed in for the academy team, or whatever you want to call it, he actually looked good. He looked good because, once again, the same kind of mold there with not too many big personalities. He is allowed to, lane. I think Hiva was a support, and I know that he is also a big communicator. So I think he just fits Rogue perfectly because they had Hikyu and Woolite before, and they're just not good enough. And for the rest of the Rogue roster, I think they were on an upwards trajectory. Rogue went through a year of trying to sub in Profit and do whatever the fuck. It was just a clusterfuck. Spring Split was wasted. Summer, they began to become better and better and better. And I think the reason everyone hyped them up was because it is a known quantity, and everyone in that team was playing in a way where you could see, okay, this makes sense. The mistakes that are happening is usually like some tempo mistake or someone's positioning wrong, but they were having a very, very clear idea of how they want to execute the map. And we saw that in the first week too. They are playing around mid lane. Larson is playing around the side lane, finding flanks, killing Fabiven over and over. They are setting up the early game properly. Inspired pathing is also good, and the laning across the board is strong. So I think this is a very solid team that can, for sure, contest top 4.
I think it is worth mentioning that they did sort of lose control of that second game there for a bit, and sort of it took the Baron throw against XL, like XL throwing at Baron, for them to come back into it. But they caught the Baron throw and then executed it well after that. So I guess my concern would be is that I didn't see kind of the same level of map movement that we saw from other teams. I did see Hansama looks way better this year. I mean, he looked fantastic in both of these games. Larson's mechanics and sort of sense about Kiana ultimates I thought was really impressive, and the way that he played the lane up against Fabiven was really good. Finn didn't do a whole lot, but he didn't have to either. It wasn't one of those things where he was dropping the ball. It's just a lot of the time his teammates were just winning fights and he would just TP in and just sort of clean it up, which isn't a bad problem to have. It's not like he was throwing or feeding or anything like that. It was just that the rest of his team, especially Hansama and Larson, I thought were doing so well that he didn't have to do much in order to win those games.
It's also with their opposition, XL, famously also last year, they didn't get to playoffs, but they were starting to improve as they stopped doing these silly roster moves all the time. Cadril was always leading a very, very strong early game, and this is what we saw in the game as well with the Talia Pantheon. And what I liked about Rogue as well, which I didn't touch on, was how they adjusted in draft. Usually, like in the first week, I don't think a lot of teams would have the instinct to pick Vladimir there, because Vladimir was just perfect. There was a time in the game where Vladimir is going to explode in 1v9 because the entire enemy composition is just terrible against it. So I like the instinct in draft as well, and I want to give credit to the early game as well with XL, because this is the trend that Cadril has been on, and that's why a lot of people are also hyping him up.
So Frey's their coach now. Interesting. That's a throwback.
Yeah, I remember I used to play against this guy back in season 3. Played Riven top against this Renekton.
Are we ready to move on to the next team?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the bad, right? It's going to be a team that Yamato here was trying to play the role of Vince McMahon himself. He was trying to sell some wolf tickets, boys. He was out there hyping Schalke up on that Euphoria podcast.
Because I thought that was the ugly.
No. You're going to wait and see what the ugly is. You were putting them in the B tier above Fnatic, like all sorts of wild stuff going on. So listen, obviously, someone who I've enjoyed Forgiven's career a long time. But if you notice, this is one mistake people always make about me. It's a weird thing that they always like paint me with the wrong brush. They always pretend I am the biggest fan of the teams that my favorite players play for, and that I think those teams will win. Well, I don't know if you followed any of my career, but that has never been the case. Like, if there's anyone who hates all the members of Zubu Blaze, everyone in Elements, everyone in Golden Garden, there's no one who hates them more, because my favorite player plays there and he's trapped in a prison. So I've never understood that whatsoever. So I will say, listen, I'm hoping that Forgiven's going to be good, but this ain't the team that's going to happen in homie. Like, this was not good. This is a nightmare.
You know, my mistake was, I was asking all of the players that I know, like, who is looking strong in scrim.
I heard the scrim
who's looking better,
big, right?
And then I realized that the top 4 teams are only scrimming each other, and then the bottom is only scrimming each other. So it's like the bottom teams were telling me, "Oh, this team is good. This team is good," and these are the teams that you look to beat. And that
serves you right for trying to do insider trading on the scrim economy. How dare you? Yes, the SEC came in and shut you down, son.
Exactly. And my angle with Schalke was, if they're gonna do well, it's gonna be in the beginning. If they don't start gun blazing, then this is straight to 10th place, possibly, depending on how ugly Misfits and Vitality is, I guess.
It does look pretty dire, I have to say. Like, the other problem as well is, like, it's not even a team where when I look at the lineup on paper, I have all these reasons why they should be way better. Like, after seeing them in the games, yes, week 1 only, but I also don't think they have that crazy roster on paper overall. Like, they require Forgiven to basically be among the best ADCs. Yeah. They need Odoamne to have a flashback to 3. They have a lot of things that a lot of things that aren't guaranteed yet have to happen, basically.
Yeah.
So that's why I picked them as my bad, because when you consider where they were expected to be, it's looking bad.
They are D tier for me now. That to me, they are D tier. They belong.
Only took a week. They dropped from B to D.
It's just that also from their draft already we know that forgiven no Senna, no Aphelios, and then if Mr. Rana is not getting.
I spent the whole off season, Yamato, trying to convince people Forgiven can evolve too. He can grow. Look, I know he refused to play Sivir and Kalista when they were the most bossy champions, but listen, he won't be like that now. I've seen him in solo queue. He does play the Kai'Sa and stuff. Then he comes into the league like, oh, we could pick a Senna here. You know that champion with like unlimited range? I'll take Varus on this game, or whatever it was he took. Like, give me a break.
He never played Varus in the past. So he actually trained it, right? He picked it up. There was a choice. It was like Varus right now is just the right level of balance. When he was really OP, I didn't play it because I respect myself, and now he's it
was actually Xayah in the game I was thinking of, but whatever. Yeah, you get the point anyway.
What's funny though is like statistically, out of all the care ADs in LEC, he's actually second in gold differential at 10 minutes behind Reckless. So his early game, even in 2 losses, has been going pretty decently, right? So we still know he's a great laner, right?
Yeah.
He was definitely.
Plus, we all know every year Reckless just has all the straight fire lineups given to him. He's literally the kid born with the silver spoon in his mouth. So if you've got a similar net worth and you're just grinding up with all bombs from the street and you're making your startup company get good, and you're just behind the CEO, like the son of the CEO, just nepotistically got put into his dad's company or whatever, you're doing pretty well. Like you like these analogies, don't they? Straight fire this episode, you might.
Very nice. It's very nice.
But yeah, I do agree. Like Schalke was disappointing this week.
Oh, and by the way, you know what, Yamato? I'm not going to let you off the hook on this one, mate. Listen, I know you like to talk up the players that have been in your teams and do the rest of it. I tell you one of the reasons why I could never, even before, and listen, I know I didn't do a show where we talked about LEC, sadly, so I couldn't say this on the record, but I would already have said I didn't think Schalke was going to be good for one particular reason. Do you remember the role that they filled the last of the 5 players? They had Forgiven, and obviously they already had Odoamne and had Dage, and then they got Dreams, and do you remember the last role they had to fill? There was one role in the game left. Huh? Yeah, the role that everyone says, everyone out there, like Yankos, they're all saying, look, jungle role has no impact. Bullshit. Gilias was the MVP of the other team. Listen, your boy Gilias he hasn't had a great start to LEC. Put it out.
No, it's just like he was non-existent on Elise. It was like the thing is, this team is filled with one tricks. That's the thing. Odoamne, Ornn one trick, jungle, Gragas one trick. Abadage, Cassiopeia one trick. When these champions are out, when teams are starting to ban these, you know what's gonna happen? Oh, some OPs are out. Oh, Forgiven doesn't play them. Okay, well, blows. Yes. I am happy to admit that I was so wrong, so wrong, unbelievably wrong. I'm okay to admit it.
But you're right now. Everything is the universe is back in order.
Right, you ready to move on to the 13?
I don't want to talk about Schalke anymore.
So are you ready? Because I'm going to be creative here. Like, everyone's going to go like, oh, boo. Are you ready? So the ugly was Fnatic in that game against Origin. Oh, what up now, homies? You all thought that was an upgrade, did you? You thought that was a great move, did you? This looked bad. Come on. Remember, Fnatic, the logic went like this, Yamato. Since they were so close to G2 at the end of summer, obviously they literally could have won the championship. At Worlds even, they got out of the good group. So they take out Broxah, heavily criticised all year. They bring in Selfmade, the guy who seems to have unlimited potential, looks like an amazing individual talent. That's supposed to be the upgrade. You reunite Nemesis and stuff. Like every narrative said, Fnatic should be one of the teams that starts straight out the gates. It should be banging.
So let's talk about Selfmade first, because there's a stat I want to bring up here, which is that his kill participation as a jungler is 36.8%, which puts him last out of all junglers. Yeah, that's bad for a jungler. So to put this in comparison, Gilias is the second worst with 59.1%. So we're talking about almost 23% difference between the worst and second worst junglers. And most of the junglers are between like 60 and 70%. So Selfmade here, he is not helping in a lot of these fights.
Well, to be fair, the kill participation can be very, like the game that they played, the second game, it was just people getting solo kills all over the place. So it can be very,
Was that the game you played Kiana?
No, the Kiana game was the Lost Origin.
Okay.
The Lost Origin game.
And the other game was against Misfits, so that doesn't count because the boy was in the server.
If we start there, he was heavily criticized for his Kiana performance, but that was like a showcase of he was not the greatest Kiana.
He was all right.
Greatest. He had a good start. He managed to burn the flash of LeBlanc, managed to burn the flash of GP. And then he realized, oh, Gragas took my Raptors. I need to catch up for the next 6 minutes. And I think in those moments, that's where you have to really commit yourself into cashing in on that advantage, because otherwise you're going to be behind for the rest of the game. And I think this is what happened. Eventually, Gragas was so far ahead on tempo that he could just keep ganking this pointless, useless, garbage Swain pick. The worst pick I saw.
Can we talk about that? That was hilarious.
Swain Conqueror, like every time I open Reddit, the top post is like, Swain is so terrible. Why did they do this? Like even the Redditors call this one right, And on top of that, against Swain, people are telling me, yeah, well, Wunder picked it in 2019 at MSI to counter GP. Well, Nimbus Cloak was different, Swain was different, the whole world was different, right?
Well,
and he went Conqueror, tried to flash in, and it was just terrible. And I think it was hard to review it because in the back of my mind, I was like, why am I supposed to review this game when OG is sitting there laughing at the Swain pick because they know they will just win this game automatically?
What I found so funny about this is I was trying to figure out, again, this is one of those moments where I'm like, am I missing something here? Because I've been out of the game for a while. And I'm watching it and I'm like, is the Swain supposed to split push? Because if you actually look at the comp that Origin has, they have disengage from Gragas, right? You just barrel him. You think you're going to catch LeBlanc with Swain? No. Like, you've got the Xayah ultimate, right? You can just zone him out with barrels with GP, or just GP ult while he's ulting, and then you just kite him, and then he does nothing. Like, he against this composition, he actually just can't even, like, get into the middle of the team fight because there's not enough engage on the Fnatic side, and if he has no flash, what is he supposed to do in a team fight? So so he has to split push. But how are you going to split push when you're playing against, the wave clear of GP and the wave clear of LeBlanc? Like, you just don't fight him. I don't know. I thought this pick was incredibly wacky, and just watching him sadly like waddle around in the middle of team fights doing absolutely nothing. And Origin played it well. They just backed off when he's ulting, and then they're like, okay, well, you didn't do anything. And now we can just engage onto your backline.
It was so weird because both games Origin played, even though they played super well, they played against two drafts that were complete garbage. They played with the Schalke game. It was like, Renekton on top. We're going to expect Schalke to snowball with a Renekton on top. Because Renekton is another one of those champions that I put in the same box as Lee Sin. Some top lane teams are allowed to play it. FPX with Khan, they can play Renekton on top. They can snowball a game. But Schalke snowballing through top, oh, no. Because I spoke to Origin afterwards. They told me, like, when we saw the Elise, we were like, if we don't get level 3 ganked, nothing's going to ever happen to us ever again. So we make sure we don't get level 3 ganked and we're good. And that's the point where they thought they won the game. And then they just kept camping mid. And then when LeBlanc is strong enough to win split, the game was over. So 2 games, Origin played very slow, but they could because of how garbage the enemy draft was.
Thing is, this would be an amazing draft in like season 5. If we just get a time machine, they've won the draft. Well done. Maybe they were reviewing way too old pods. This is ridiculous. What the hell?
Yeah,
they probably would want for this.
So I do agree. Like, Origin is a little bit of a toss-up because it's hard to know how good they are, because I feel like it was pretty obvious what their win conditions were in that game, and they just played it out well, which obviously you want to see, but I never felt like it was really a challenge. Like, they didn't just do something extremely stupid into the Swain, like all walk into his ult, right? They just played around cooldowns.
It's a classic first week, right? Where it's very evident who didn't figure out the meta and the teams that did. And Origin have a history of doing it well. Teams under Gelotto always first week they come out. I remember we played them first week. I don't remember which split, and they just like threw Camille, Sejuani, Camille mid, and we're like, what the fuck is happening to us, right? Because they just like looked at LCK the day before. I was like, oh, this is good. Let's take it, But this time around, they couldn't steal from anywhere because like China have the coronavirus and LCK is starting later. So there was not a lot to pull from. So I give them credit, full credit for really figuring out the right.
Come up with their own ideas for this one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Unlucky. So I've got an idea. Let's do the Puma giveaway, and let's let Twitch chat pick about which LEC team we want to talk about. Okay.
Oh, Twitch does Summoning Insight. Nice.
Twitch does Summoning Insight.
Finally got the format we need.
So you guys hashtag Puma and whichever team from LEC you want us to talk about in chat, and one of you who lives in North America, so none of you Euros, and who's over 18 will be selected to win a Puma gift certificate. So there you go. Hashtag Puma, guys. You have to hashtag Puma and then tag a team. G2, Mad Lions.
So far, almost no one's figured out the hashtag part. Remember listen to the first part of the words he's saying, not just the part about your team.
I mean, you could just.
I know you're very excited, but say the hashtag Puma and then put your team name.
I mean, you could just spam the team name if you want, but you exactly, can't win the gift card that way. So
there we go. Now they figured
Thank
out.
You. All right. We will talk about G2 and Mad Lions. That seems good. That seems like what most people want. Mad Lions, now, surprising for me coming in because I wasn't, I'm coming back in, so there are a bunch of new players that I don't have a lot of experience with.
Monty, you have to realize, unless you basically watched EU Masters or the national leagues, you wouldn't know these players. It's only Humanoid you could know. I don't know most of these players. I only saw I saw the Orme guy when he was with Freeze's team or something. I've barely ever seen these players myself. So it's there's not that many people are scouting that level, put that way. Even a lot of the LEC coaches don't go too deep. So it's no shame on you on that. The whole point of this lineup is it is basically a new lineup.
Yeah, and it was exciting. I mean, the lead they got early against G2 was really good. And if G2 wasn't an absolutely top tier world macro team, they wouldn't have come back. Very few teams could have come back from that level of deficit. So now that you have the most insight, Yamato, on these players because I haven't seen them very much, like Thorin's saying, because they've just been in the amateur tiers.
I've got a question for you, Yamato. The one I wanted to actually direct this. What do you actually think of Kazi? Because he's the player, basically, that veteran and the other people who know that scene tell me actually shouldn't just be an LEC player. He could be the best ADC. They claim he has that kind of ceiling. Do you agree?
I think he has the personality to be bold. That's always what I'm looking out for players that want to really, really go beyond just being a basic player. I think that's super important. The way I define the whole Mad Lions roster is that they are the dark horse. The joke I did on the analyst desk was that this might be where G2 might find their future players. And, in the world of taking in rookies, everyone is everyone's hyping up rookies so much, but people have forgotten completely about the sad side of rookies, that some of them are just shit. Some of them are going to be shit. It's good that teams are taking risks, but some of them are going to be shit. And I think when it comes to Peter Dunn and the level of scouting he's doing, because it's the same thing for me. I trusted the opinion of a lot of other people when I was researching players, and then I looked into them. And Peter Dunn, always the way he's tweeting or the way he's oh, look at this guy. He's in the jungle of Zimbabwe. He can be the next best top laner. It's what the fuck are you talking about? So I have this level of trust in Peter Dunn's scouting. And
obviously, Papa Smith, he's give me his number now, please.
MonteCristo, I see what you mean now. He's always trying to top the joke, right?
It's all right.
Well, and in terms of your question about Kazi, definitely, but it will take time. And he has a lot of time. That's the beauty of it. I think the benchmark he's starting at is super good because they did, in fact, punish G2's bot lane when they could. And then he played the Aphelios, and maybe there were some opportunities where he could pop off, but he just didn't take them. Sure, I think this is a player that will be a staple player in Europe or maybe get kidnapped to LCS with time. I think that's something that could be potentially said about everyone in Mad Lions. I'm impressed by Shadow. The only person that I like the least is Humanoid. Because in the conversation of EU mids, I think EU mid is quite boring this year. There is Larsen, there is Perks, and there is Nuktak, and everything else is, Nemesis, sure, you can put him there, but then the rest is kind of a question mark. I think a lot of mid laners were hiding behind Akali. Because Akali just... You could remove your brain completely, and then it's okay, I'm in Zimbabwe farming the enemy top tower, and my team is in base. I can just dash twice super, super far and just get away from anything, right? And then we see Humanoid playing something like a Mordekaiser, right? And he just gets caught over and over and over. Last year, he had the highest amount of isolated deaths. He was second place, but he was behind Vichichachi because, this is his classic thing. Vichichachi on side lane dying. Humanoid was second place. And I don't see that just because of that first game. I'm worried about Humanoid. It's something that can be addressed, something that can be improved. But there is this generation of rookie mid laners from last year that I think used Akali as a crutch, and coming into 10.3, everyone's already perma-banning Akali. So you see some of these mid laners being exposed, like Abadage or of course, Humanoid. So we'll just have to see with time if he actually figures out how to play side lane, because I think the rest of the roster looks very promising.
I do agree, actually, now that I reflect on it. I wasn't too impressed, like especially the Caps Perks swap in mid lane, also arguably, at least temporarily, reducing the overall level of mid lane play. I thought Febivin looked pretty bad, which was
the only one who he didn't mention there, who basically I would say I'll put in the category that I think he has promise, is Larson. I think
Larson's mechanics are really good.
I said Larson.
Sorry. My apologies.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
I do
I'll
think
check the VOD later and see what you do.
I do think it is sort of less exciting in that way. I mean, I enjoyed watching Carzzy on the Aphelios in particular. I thought that he was looking pretty good on that champ. Worth noting that you say like he tends to play a higher risk style. He has died more than any other AD carry in the LEC so far. So despite the fact that he has 2 wins, so he's died more even than carries that have fewer wins, which is certainly something that they probably want to address at some point in time. But small sample size, so just something to keep an eye on.
I think just the fact that he's having fun, that's such a big deal, having fun while you're playing your first game. It might sound ridiculous. I know.
Just because it's the Cloud9 Twitch channel, you don't have to buy into the marketing.
Listen to me. There are some players there. There are some rookies. There were some rookies that just look like this.
Yeah, of course.
They just didn't know how to handle it, And then they were like trying to flash EQ, and they just flag too far, and it just looks terrible. And it's like, And then the other players are laughing on stage. They feel comfortable,
You know where Schoenfire was just thinking in the back of his mind? You don't want to look foolish with the ult. Save the ult. Hold the ult. Keep it wait. The right moment's going to come. You're going to be the hero, homie. You're going to come in with the ult. Any moment now, the ult. Any minute now with the ult. The game's ended. Oh, well, next game. You get him next game, son. Get him next game. You walk. Yeah, I agree. That is what most rookies are like, to be fair. They either fully int by going way too ham trying to make a player, or they do the opposite and they're like you. They just a deer in the headlights, just shut completely and can't do anything, can they?
Yeah, I will say, like, Mad Lions didn't look scared. And I think a really good sign is that when you start your season and you are the ones who are playing against G2 as the first game, like this legendary team, everybody won MSI last year, and you totally ball out of control and just get an enormous lead, you could feel pretty confident about that, because at least at that point in time, you don't have the nerves. And so it's just about converting your macro and like tightening things up so that you can get your late game shot calling into a good place.
Yeah.
So,
easy to solve issues, for sure.
By the way, one thing, just because we haven't mentioned G too much, because the problem is, because everyone sees the same 5 players, even though they've had the role swap, and everyone assumes they're going to be the best, it's actually made people think there's nothing to talk about with G2. But I want to say one thing I actually love about G2, and it's another classic contrast that I'll draw with the team everyone was loving to contrast them with last year, of when Moscow 5 was at their best. And they just, every part fit together and they were unbeatable. But one thing people forget is the most charming, the most like fun element of Moscow 5 wasn't the games where they just stomped you. It was the games where they were behind and they had to win all those god tier amazing team fights, right? So it's the same thing I love with this G2. Like, I love games like this where they're actually behind, and like you were saying, YamatoCannon, they have to come up with some like super like 7-dimensional Jenga solution to the it's like they're one of those like magicians that he has to start off like, right, I'm going to be in this tank. Ooh, how's he going to get out? No, wait. I'm going to have my hands cuffed behind my back, and there's going to be a shark that enters the tank at 2 minutes to kill me. It's like, you have to make it really hype before you then do the amazing escape. Like, that makes it better, because then it looks more genius. Because the fact they're figuring this stuff out on the fly, like, there's no way you can be coaching this. Nobody could. You've never been in that situation. It's just amazing, like, the problem-solving ability that team has together.
Yeah, like Moscow 5 is a great example, because this is how they were scrimming. I remember even myself, the first LCS game I played on stage, first level 1, I go and kill Diamond Prox. And then I solo kill Alex Ish. And this is my first game, I feel good. Then I look back at the VOD, where did everything go wrong? And they just twist us and turn us and just destroy us, and we just had no chance. And I think Moscow 5 is the ideal example, because this is what they did too. I think always when I look back at these historic teams, they always brought something that was revolutionizing. And I think the way Moscow 5 fought around cooldowns and waited patiently, where Darian walked in, took a lot of damage, but took a lot of cooldowns, and then they kind of pushed I think definitely this is what Moscow 5 were the inventors of, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it is just amazing to watch them play for the reasons that Thorin's saying. Their ability to think on the fly is almost, I would say, unprecedented in League of Legends history, which is why I was so surprised and delighted by them last year. And I think their first game of the season really showed that. The way that, I mean, talk about a role swap, and then the Senna comes out, and we don't even see Perks dying on the Senna, and he's affecting the rest of the map. They just have this constant sense of where everyone on the map is, and they're able to play around that absolutely beautifully. I thought that Wonder, even though he was falling behind early, actually managed to make some really good roams into the bottom side of the map in the mid game in order to really pick things up for the rest of the team. And they don't get flustered by falling behind early. He does a couple early kills. They're still going to figure out a way to beat you.
Well, here's the thing. They basically represent the best of what, like, you know, that, like, here's the thing. As usual, with most stereotypes, you know, there's a grain of truth in there, which is where it comes from. And then people just exaggerate it. It becomes shorthand that gets spammed too much. So if you remember, famously, you'll know this, Monty, from the StarCraft days. In StarCraft 2, what people would do to kind of justify in their mind why they could still be a fan of the European or the American player when the Korean was obviously better, was they would say, they would make this really like super black and white definition where they were like, well, the problem with Koreans that I don't like is like they're so regimented and they all just like do the same style of playing. It's like robotic. But you know, the Westerner, it's like, you know, he's like fluid and artistic and he's like in touch with his feelings.
Which would always, you know, which is obviously just bullshit, because the whole thing about that is like some Korean players like Innovation were very robotic in their play, right, in StarCraft. But then you've got guys like sOAZ where it's absolutely true that it was just incredible creative play and like crazy good adaptation. So anyway, continue.
Yeah, but here's how it ties back in there. It's like the difference is they were wrong in the sense that they were like the problem they had there was they were almost judging it as though it was based on your personality. And as you say, like all Koreans would be this way and all the Westerns would be the other way. Whereas like there was obviously incredibly boring Westerns that just played one style and just did the same thing over and over again. But here's the thing, where it actually fits is more in like the team games like League of Legends, because it's more to me about the way you conceptualize your team and how you improve in the game. So it is actually a fact, if you know the way Koreans work, that they actually have a strict hierarchy within the team and within the coaching structure. And they do have a concept, a base concept of how they want to play. And then they break you down like a military boot camp to nothing from whatever you were in solo queue, and they build you up to what they want you to be, this type of jungler, this type of top laner, this type of support. And they do practice things in games. So as a result, you always saw the best Korean games were the ones where they played perfect macro, because what they were doing was almost doing like a checklist of this follows this, and this is the correct. That's the reason why famously, if you ever got a nightmare scenario where the number 2 team in Korea always lost to the number 1, the games could even be boring, because it's like, right, I do the right move and I'm ahead, and they're like, damn, they did the right move, we better do the correct response to that, even though we're behind, right? We move slightly. It's like playing a chess game. If you give the other guy the first 5 moves, you lose, but like you never had a chance to win. Whereas the whole difference is, as you saw at this last Worlds, SK Telecom, in a world where it was way more open-ended in the game and you had to make a lot of reads off the game, they couldn't do this perfect macro of the old days. They had really strong players, but they would collapse at certain points in the game. Meanwhile, G2 was like the hyper-exaggeration of the idea that we're just going to on the fly figure things out, and I'm going to try this creative, just go with me, guys, and we'll do it. And so that's why actually I thought it was amazing that at Worlds, even though they didn't win Worlds, G2 literally beat all the Korean teams when it mattered, basically.
I mean, here's the thing, is that the game, to make a different analogy, the game used to be more like chess, where the entire board is visible because of the way that vision operates. Like, yes, there's fog of war, but you have ways to know and see the complete board at any given time. When the game's pace was accelerated and when vision was changed, playing now is more like playing Texas Hold'em poker, where you have some cards that everybody can see, but you're having to take percentage plays now in a way that you did not have to do before, because if you were a perfect vision team in Korea, you would always have all the information, and you just don't have all the you can't have all the information anymore. And so G2 is playing poker, and a lot of these Korean teams are trying to figure out how to play poker when they've been playing chess for years.
I think also to follow up on this, and I think I agree completely with Korea looking to always make educated solutions to the problem. And I think when it came to the mid game, always in Korea everything slowed down, because In the end, what was always happening was that very similar to, similar, I'm not going to use that example because I wanted to reference to TSM yesterday, and that's completely unfair to LCK. What they are doing is they are constantly showing and they are constantly defending, while Fnatic and G2, what they were constantly doing were they were just abusing fog of war and they are fake pressuring. Fake pressuring, fake pressuring, fake pressuring. And the reason FPX won Worlds and why they were so goddamn good in the early game was because Doinby went into the heads of every mid laner that he played against. He made you feel like Tian is sniffing your ass the entire game. And then Tian was very good at finding those opportunities, and then they just broke things apart. And in contrast, G2, what I think they did the best out of any team was the creativity part in terms of solving solutions mid to late game. Because some of those games against FPX, like the first game, that was definitely winnable, but then they just lack discipline. Now, I blame that on the lack of practice in summer and also boot camping in Europe. They just lack discipline, and FPX was probably the most disciplined team at the tournament. And in regards to what were we talking about in the first place? How did we get here?
Talking about G2 and their problem solving.
G2,
By the way, just as an aside, if Korea's playing chess and Europe's playing No Limit Hold'em poker, obviously NA's playing Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Yes.
Two robots punch on the head till one of you wins. You know?
I would have said
remember my point
hungry hippos, but every
There we
marble
go. That's not bad.
every marble is just worth money.
Yeah, there you go. Right, what was your point about G2?
The G2 thing, what worries me about G2, well, maybe not worries, because I think they should take it slow in spring. They should enjoy themselves. They should, line themselves up to peak at the World Championship, because I think this is something they didn't do in 2009. They peaked in spring and also at MSI. And with this in mind, what worries me is that they are still showing the same negative tendencies that they showed at the World Championship. Lack of discipline, and also a severe problem in the early game. Because many games they fall behind. Many games they fall behind. Against SK Telecom, if I remember correctly, all games they fell behind. Except that one game when they had like a terrible draft. And maybe then they realized as they're loading into the game, holy shit, we're already in trouble. We have to activate our problem solving, or something. So this worries me, because I thought with Perks and Youngers, with the history that they're playing together, maybe there's some room for some 2v2. But also the drafts were also a bit cocktail, but they kind of figured out how to play it. Because coming into the World Championship, what you want from G2 is that they figure out their early game, because I think still their mid to late game decision making is the best in the entire world.
So here's a question, and I think this is really part of the fundamental identity of G2, and I'm not sure you can get rid of the lack of discipline and the lack of good play in the early game, because part of G2's power, weirdly, is having this blasé attitude where they never get flustered and they sort of just laugh it off. And if you were to impose harsh discipline on this team, would it affect their mentality in the mid and late game? Like, these guys just aren't built for a really strict system. And by trying to impose that on them, I worry if you would lose a lot of what actually makes them great or makes them mentally resilient. Like, I think it's a very hard coaching call, honestly. What do you think?
Well, maybe discipline is the wrong word. Like my issue with it all was in spring, G2 came in, they had so much to prove, right?
Mm-hmm.
Caps was moving from the biggest team to the rival. Mickey came from a shitty Misfits year where he got benched by his coach, which was Jessis, which is like, what the hell? And then you had Perks moving to AD carry. They had so much to prove. They came in spring, guns blazing. And then on top of that, they had strong early games. They had discipline. This was when Caps was just destroying everybody. He was doing these 1v9 performances on Akali and so forth. And then coming into MSI, watching them play against SK Telecom. Sure, the first game, they picked Sona Tarek or whatever the fuck, and it went to shit. Fine. But then the other games, they were, in fact, disciplined. So I believe when I say disciplined, not just moving away from doing these sloppy mistakes where people get caught or like just die on side because they're farming too long, like humanoid mistakes, These are the ones I want to be just out of the picture, because I saw G2 being capable of this. So maybe discipline is the wrong word, the harsh word. Is more about just filtering out all the bullshit. And I imagine G2's plan is to, when summer starts, this is where they go guns blazing. MSI, maybe they don't scrim, maybe they do. They take it easy and whatever, Maybe the G2 vacation thing goes full circle, and in reality, they were genius back then.
I'll come down in the middle between the two positions because I kind of agree with Yamato. Kind of like, for example, even in the summer split last year, they would actually have sometimes whack early games. They were just so good in the mid game, it didn't matter. Now, the problem I have with that is I could see it being a bit of both. Like, yes, on the one hand, I agree with Monty. I think in that team, you're never aiming for like the Korean regimented approach just because you want to let them have expression and you want people to try stuff that might not even work. You've got such a brilliant team. You want a bit of that and you want a fun element of like laughing off a mistake rather than scrutinizing it in the VOD review. But at the same time, the reason why I kind of agree with Yamato is if you have players as good as they have, you should have amazing early games. Like the idea you should have some of the worst is ridiculous. So at that point, it is possible you go too far with what Monty was saying. And now it's a crutch because the idea is like, we'll get it back in later on in the game. And you know what? We're just so troll in the early game, but then we really buckle down. You know, it's got to be somewhere between the two. It's got to be a healthy balance, you know.
I just think they've shown that they are capable of both, you know, and that's what makes me so hyped on G2. Like when I saw them play the finals against Origin, I instantly called they're going to win MSI. Sure, they avoided IG and IG imploded, and that's where some kind of risk came to my call. You know, you want to be bold, you want to have likes.
Yeah,
you guys know the business, and then you know IG imploded, and it worked out because the level of play they showed very little weakness, and the intelligence of what they had in mid to late game was still there, even though they didn't fuck around in the early game. So I think there's a world where there's both. I don't think you need to lose one to gain the other, because even when you look at like the individual performances in spring, like Mickey X was absolutely monstrous. Wonder Caps Perks was getting into his role, getting better and better. And then Jankos continued on to summer, had the MVP performance. But then at the World Championship, honestly, I didn't feel like anyone else was playing besides, you know, if I rate the players, I think Caps, Perks, they would be like the best performance. Yes, then Wonder, and then Jankos and Mickey X were just really, really far down, right?
Well, they've said this before, right? That they peaked too early. I mean, we talked a lot about that a lot. They know that. They've said it. That, you know, this was a mistake, and it is hard. I think this is another one of those things where I really wish the League of Legends season was shorter, because it's so punishing on the top teams going from January to November. Like, you know, it's such a long season if you're good, that it weirdly, like, this is why I don't like it. So because you have to play so many extra games if you're good, if you're trying to grind it out the entire time, then you end up potentially burning out, right? Like we saw G2 did at Worlds, even after they had a spectacular spring and MSI. Oh. Now, the problem with this is I would like to, I know this is very selfish of me, I would like to see top teams be able to play at a top level for the entirety of a season, which when you have an 11-month-long season or 10-month-long season is a lot to ask of those players. So I feel like we're getting worse competition, or at least less disciplined or less consistent competition, because the top teams have so much burden in terms of burnout on them. So I just would like them to play this.
By the way, as an aside, because I notice people always get confused, because whenever we talk about burnout, it's hilarious, because in the two big games I follow, League of Legends and CSGO, people both complain about burnout. And so what they do is they look over the other side of the neighbor's fence and go, the grass seems a lot greener over there. What we need in CSGO is like less tournaments and like a big league where we're all in one location, and it's like that brings its own type of burnout, because the problem that you have in the, as you say, the 10-month season, Monty, is you're not allowed to be bad for 3 weeks over that season. Generally, right. Like you have to try and be like, if you're G2, the problem is every week in theory you're supposed to be the best in the world, and nobody in any esports game, by the way, can maintain that for 10 months. As in literally, it's famous in Dota 2, for example, that the team who's the best in the spring never wins TI by the time TI rolls around in like August, September. Similar in most games, like you hit your peak and you're at it for maybe 3 months if you're an amazing team. Like it's very rare. Even the teams that win both the splits, you just think they were dominant because they won the splits at the end. Oftentimes they have like a summer that dips and then they come back in the playoffs, or they were the second best team and then they got better in the play. Like usually it's not the storyline people are thinking of, the big through line. Meanwhile, in CSGO, the way you get burned out there is you play too many individual tournaments. But the upside in that game is if you have a bad tournament and you go out in the very beginning on day 2, you have the rest of the day out. Like you actually can get a respite. You can have a bad tournament and still come back and win the major later. So each of them has pros and cons. Neither is ideal. And so I actually think both scenes kind of like lose track of the fact that neither's the perfect scenario, basically.
Well, and this goes back to the fact that teams can take a break now in spring, right? You think G2's practicing a lot for a meaningless spring? Absolutely not. They're just kind of like, they're just going to derp around for a while and rely on their strengths. And if they're smart, take it easy. But again, goes back to the format discussion where it's like, that's cool. But if we just had a shorter season, we could solve both of these problems where we could get them actually trying and them working hard, and good games at the same time. So I don't know. I think that I'm hoping that this is step one towards consolidating the spring and summer splits and starting the season later in like February or March.
Give us a Champions League, man. Just give us a whole...
Dude, I would love that.
Give us a Champions League. Just invite the best 3 teams. You can just take it in the middle of the season. Oh, these 3 teams are the best. It's easy to make such a decision. And then you just, you have maybe like a 2-week conference where all the other teams get to rest, and then we have good competition. And then maybe later, the teams that went to the Champions League thing get a 2-week break while the league continues. And then you can just structure around that instead of having a silly spring split and just have one big long season with a lot of pauses and fill that in with international competition. And then when the teams that are internationally competing are resting, you let the leagues play again. I think there is a lot of potential there. Also maybe a World Cup. I don't know what the financial logistic part of it would be. Probably a shit show, because I'm not that type of a person when it comes to managerial things. But that's kind of my dream, for what it would look like.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just not a fan of the World Cup. Like, I don't even like the World Cup in soccer because I feel like we're actually just watching worse soccer because these players aren't playing with their typical teammates, and so the synergy isn't necessarily there. So I actually just hate World Cups in general.
I don't think they're that good either. I think the problem is you can never talk about with football soccer fans because they obviously do have the whole history of being hooked into their country, so they're blinded to the idea that it's brilliant. So we put that to one side. I vote that since the only teams we didn't talk about in LEC are the bad teams, we just leave those for another episode when they do something or have an interesting match. So how about we just give Yamato his last word or whatever, because he's he's out there on his own now. He's been cast out by the world. That last second heartbreak. Cut from his job. He's just on the streets holding up a sign, "We'll make YouTube videos for food." He's trying to earn a crust like the rest of us. We've invited him into our house for Christmas, the little poor pauper boy outside. We've given him a plate of goose and stuffing and everything, and now he has to go back out into the cold. So you have a final word for us, Yamato? Any place where people can find your humble first attempts at content? Not Reddit, because they keep downvoting you like little fuckers, but
I have my YouTube channel, my Twitter. I don't feel the need to plug anything. It's cool. I think anyone that wants to find it will find it. I've never heard anyone plug anything. Okay, I'm gonna go check that out. I've never ever done that, so I will just say that it's fun to do content. It's fun to do content. It's not too bad. I try to work hard, and I try to work with the LEC now. So I'm busy in my own way, but I'll be back coaching, because I see some of these guys that are coaching teams, and they'll go out. Eventually they'll just move out from their position, and I'm just sitting here preparing, waiting to strike, because some of the things that I'm seeing is a disaster. Even now, sure, I got fired from Vitality, but it doesn't look too bright for Vitality either. So we'll just have to see how.
We've got the last laugh on that one.
It's all right.
Because in the end, in a world where people are taking in rookie teams to remove the guy from the scene.
That's your thing. Exactly.
That's my thing.
The swagger jacked you. You invented doing that.
Yeah, I invented doing that. Legit.
Exactly.
2016 went to Worlds. 2017 Misfits went with the rookie roster, went to Worlds. Good on them. 2018 Yamato's back with the rookie roster and swinging big dick. I think my mistake was not to leave my team after going to the Worlds. Just leave, leave, and then, the expectations are gone, and just everyone will remember me as a hero. But instead, Vitality is not that great, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I like to...
you have to understand. Yeah, go on.
I like to think of you in the same way that I think of 100 Thieves right now, which is that somewhere out there, there's a Ryoma that's just waiting, and you're the Belter coming in to replace him right now, right? Just sitting out for the time being. I know you love this analogy. You're just waiting for another coach to fail, and then you're going to come swooping in.
Thing is, though, Yamato wasn't being cocky. He wasn't saying he's the best coach. He's just looking around the scene and seeing how bad some of these coaches are. And he goes, if there's that much free money out there, listen, in the off-season, I'm practicing bending over to pick that free money up. Like, I can steal checks just like anyone else can.
No, it's like I've made a business out of, like, I've never been on a super big team, right? I've never been on a G2 or a Fnatic with like a big budget where I'm going to hire big players. My approach has always been taking risks in terms of the players that I get so I can actually compete, right? And even with the first big team, Mitchell Makers was a disaster. I don't even know if I count that as a part of my career. I was really happy we got automatically relegated when we were 10th place because I couldn't live another moment of that shit. Yeah. And then I went, after that, my market value wasn't the greatest. I knocked on Rokat's door. I was like, just let me be a part of your team for one scrim session. And then I honestly convinced him to let me go through the door, And even that one, we almost went to Worlds. Because I looked at that roster, I was like, how the fuck is this team in relegations? What the fuck is going on in that team in order for this team to be in relegation? Jankos, Nuktak, Woolite was good back then, Vander, and then Overpower, right? That was the question mark. Overpower fans are going to attack me. So I replaced them, obviously, and I brought in Mr. Az later. So I just look at this opportunity and I tried to seize it. We went to 5 games against Origin and they went on to the semifinals. So I think my track record is quite good. I'm happy about it.
I agree. People should hire you.
Yes.
But until then, just make content and show them wrong. I'm sure some team's going to come crawling back halfway through this year, dude.
Yeah, I'm waiting. I'm ready for it. Not signing any too big contracts that will seal me somewhere. And it's important to keep busy, right?
Absolutely. All right. We're going to wrap it up here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming on, Yamato. Thanks to
sOAZ. That's good laughs.
9 Summoning Insight, presented by AT&T. Be here next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central European time. If you missed it, podcasts, VOD will be out tomorrow. Twitch VOD will be on right after this if you want to go back. Thank you very much for watching.